Hello friends. Did you know nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy these stories, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It really helps. Thank you for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The night I first saw him, I had been driving for 11 hours straight. My name is Reeves Maddox, and I have been hauling freight across the American Southwest for 16 years. In that time, I have seen things that would make most people nervous. Jackknifed rigs burning on the shoulder, dust storms that swallowed entire convoys whole, animals wandering onto the highway at the worst possible moment. But I had never seen anything I could not explain. Not until that October. I was running a load of industrial equipment from Phoenix to Albuquerque. The route took me through some of the loneliest stretches of asphalt in the country. Places where you could drive for an hour without seeing another vehicle. Where the only signs of civilization were the mile markers counting down like a slow heartbeat. Highway 6666, they used to call it, before they renamed it to calm the superstitious. But the locals still knew it by its old name. They still told stories about it. I did not believe in stories. The October air was cold and dry, carrying the smell of sage and distant rain. My rig hummed beneath me. A Peterbilt 389 with a 53-foot dry van trailer behind it. I had named her Delilah, not because I was sentimental, but because every trucker names their rig eventually. You spend enough time alone with something, you start talking to it. And if you talk to something long enough, it needs a name. The dashboard clock read 11:47 p.m. When I passed mile marker 85, the road ahead was empty. Just the twin beams of my headlights cutting through the darkness, illuminating the faded yellow center line and the occasional reflective sign warning of curves that never seemed to come. The radio played static. I had given up trying to find a station an hour ago. Out here, even the airwaves were empty. I reached for my thermos of coffee and took a sip. It was lukewarm and bitter, but it kept me alert. Trucking is not a job that forgives inattention. One moment of drowsiness, 1 second of distraction, and 40 tons of steel and cargo can become a weapon. I had seen the aftermath too many times to take chances. Mile marker 86 slid past my window. The landscape was typical high desert. Flat expanses of scrubland broken by distant mesas, their silhouettes just visible against the slightly lighter black of the sky. No moon tonight, just stars, millions of them scattered across the darkness like spilled salt. Beautiful in its way, also lonely, the kind of loneliness that settles into your bones if you let it. I checked my mirrors out of habit. The trailer was tracking straight, no wobble in the axles. Behind me, nothing but darkness. Ahead, more of the same. Mile marker 87. I remember thinking about my wife, Clara. She had asked me to take a different route, one that added an extra 2 hours to the trip. "I do not like that highway," she had said, not meeting my eyes. People say things about it. I had laughed it off. Clara was practical, level-headed, not the type to believe in roadside legends, but something in her voice had been different that night. Tighter, I should have listened. Mile marker 88 appeared in my headlights, its numbers reflective white against the green metal, and standing beside it, just at the edge of the asphalt where the shoulder met the scrubland, was a man. My foot moved toward the brake instinctively, though I did not press it. You learn quickly in this job, you do not stop for strangers on empty roads at midnight. It is not cruelty. It is survival. There are people out there who count on a trucker's good nature, who set traps using a stranded vehicle or a person standing by the roadside. I had heard the stories. Everyone had. So I did not stop. But I looked. In the 3 or 4 seconds it took for my rig to pass mile marker 88, I got a clear view of the man. He was standing perfectly still, facing the highway, facing me. His posture was rigid, almost military, with his arms hanging straight at his sides. He was wearing dark clothes that blended into the night, making it hard to tell where his body ended and the darkness began. But it was his face that I remember most clearly, or rather, the absence of it. The shadows fell across his features in such a way that I could not make out any details. No eyes, no mouth, no expression. Just a blank oval of darkness where a face should have been. I told myself it was a trick of the light, the angle of my headlights, the speed I was traveling, the lateness of the hour playing tricks on my tired eyes. That was the only explanation that made sense. People do not stand motionless beside empty highways at midnight with no face. I kept driving, but I could not stop looking in my mirrors. The man remained standing at mile marker 88, growing smaller and smaller in my rear view until he was just a dark speck against the lighter gray of the asphalt. And then he was gone, swallowed by the distance and the night. I drove another 20 miles before I allowed myself to think about what I had seen. By then, my hands had stopped shaking and my heartbeat had returned to something close to normal. I reached for the CB radio, thought about calling out to see if any other drivers were on the road, but stopped myself. What would I say? There's a man standing at mile marker 88. They would think I was losing my mind. Hell, I was starting to think I was losing my mind. So I drove on in silence, watching the mile markers count down toward my destination. Checked 68. 67. 66. Each one that passed without incident made the memory of the man at mile marker 88 feel more distant, more like something I had imagined. By the time I reached the outskirts of Albuquerque, I had almost convinced myself that it had been nothing. A hitchhiker waiting for a ride. A stranded motorist whose car had broken down out of sight. A scarecrow that some rancher had placed near the highway as a joke. There were a dozen reasonable explanations, and I chose to believe one of them rather than dwell on what I had actually seen. I delivered my load the next morning and picked up a return shipment heading back to Phoenix. Different cargo, same route. Same empty highway stretching out before me like a ribbon of gray through the brown desert. I left Albuquerque at 4 p.m., planning to drive straight through and arrive in Phoenix before midnight. The weather was clear and the traffic was light, and I made good time through the first 100 miles. But as the sun began to set behind the western mesas, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and purple, I felt a growing unease that I could not explain. The highway seemed different somehow, emptier. The few vehicles I passed were all heading in the opposite direction, toward Albuquerque. And after a while, even they stopped coming. I was alone on the road, my headlights the only light for miles in any direction. My CB radio crackled with static. I had been trying to raise other drivers for the past half hour, but the airwaves were silent. Just the soft hiss of empty frequencies and the occasional pop of distant electrical interference. I switched through the channels hoping to find someone to talk to, but there was nothing. Channel 19. Static. Channel 17. Static. Channel 14. Static. And then, on Channel 9, something else. It started as a low hum, barely audible beneath the static. A sound that might have been a voice, or might have been just another frequency artifact. I turned up the volume and listened carefully, trying to make out words in the noise. The hum grew louder, resolving itself into something that was almost, but not quite, human speech. A voice speaking from very far away, or through layers of interference that stripped away all meaning and left only tone. The tone was flat, emotionless, like someone reading numbers from a list. But there were no numbers, just that droning, wordless voice going on and on. I changed the channel, and the voice stopped. I changed it back and the voice returned, exactly as before. The same flat drone, the same meaningless syllables, the same sense of distance and wrongness. I turned off the radio. The silence that followed was almost worse. Just the rumble of my engine and the hiss of my tires on the asphalt, and the sound of my own breathing. I turned the radio back on, switched to channel 19, and let the familiar static fill the cab. Anything was better than that voice. Mile marker 100 passed, then 95, then 90. I was watching the mile markers more carefully now, counting them down like a prisoner counting days until release. Each one that passed meant I was that much closer to Phoenix, that much farther from whatever was making me feel so uneasy. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I had driven this highway hundreds of times without incident. There was nothing out here but desert and darkness, and the long, lonely road, mile marker 89. I slowed down without meaning to. My foot eased off the accelerator and the speedometer needle began to drop. 65, 60. 55. I was not sure why I was slowing down. There was no traffic ahead, no obstacle in the road, no reason to reduce speed. But something made me want to approach the next mile marker carefully. Something made me want to see what was waiting there. Mile marker 88 appeared in my headlights, and standing beside it in exactly the same spot, in exactly the same posture, was the man. This time I did stop. I do not know why. Everything I knew about highway safety, about the dangers of stopping on empty roads at night, told me to keep driving. But my foot found the brake and pressed down, and the rig shuddered to a halt about 50 yards past the mile marker. I sat there in the cab, engine idling, watching the man in my side mirror. He had not moved. He was still standing in that rigid military posture, arms at his sides facing the highway, facing the direction I had come from. If he knew I had stopped, he gave no sign of it. He simply stood there motionless, like a statue or a post or something that had never been alive. I should have driven away. I know that now. I knew it then. But instead I opened my door and stepped down from the cab. The night air was cold, much colder than it should have been for October in the desert. My breath came out in small white puffs that hung in the air before dissipating. I walked toward the back of my trailer, toward the mile marker, toward the man. My boots crunched on the gravel shoulder, the sound unnaturally loud in the silence. The man did not move. I stopped about 20 feet away from him, close enough to see details that I had missed from the cab. His clothes were not just dark, they were black. A deep and absolute black that seemed to absorb the light from my headlights rather than reflect it. His shoes were black, his pants were black, his shirt was black. Even his skin, what little I could see of it, seemed to have a grayish, lightless quality. And his face was still hidden in shadow, even though there was no logical source for the shadow. My headlights were shining directly on him. The light should have illuminated every feature, every line and wrinkle and pore. But instead, there was just that oval of darkness, that blank space where eyes and nose and mouth should have been. I tried to speak, to ask him if he needed help, if he was all right, if he wanted a ride, but my voice would not come. My throat had closed up, and all I could manage was a dry, clicking sound that died in my mouth. The man raised his arm, not quickly, not threateningly, just a slow, deliberate movement, as if he were pointing at something behind me. I turned to look, half expecting to see another figure on the opposite side of the highway, or a vehicle approaching from the distance. But there was nothing. Just the empty road and the empty desert and the stars. When I turned back, the man was closer. He had not made a sound. I had not seen him move. but he was definitely closer than he had been before. No longer 20 feet away, maybe 15, maybe 12. Close enough that I should have been able to see his face, but the shadow remained, impenetrable and wrong. I ran. I am not ashamed to admit it. I ran back to my truck faster than I have ever run in my life, my boots slipping on the gravel, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I pulled myself up into the cab, slammed the door, and threw the rig into gear. The tires spun on the asphalt as I accelerated away from mile marker 88, away from the man, away from whatever I had just experienced. I did not look in my mirrors. I drove at 80 miles per hour for the next 20 miles, not slowing down, not stopping, not looking anywhere but straight ahead. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely keep them on the wheel. My heart was pounding so hard that I could feel it in my temples, in my throat, in my chest. At mile marker 68, I finally allowed myself to breathe. At mile marker 50, I allowed myself to think. At mile marker 30, I saw the lights of a fuel station ahead and pulled off the highway. The station was a small rundown place with 2 pumps and a convenience store that had seen better days. But there were lights and people and the normal sounds of civilization, and that was enough. I parked my rig and sat in the cab for a long time, trying to stop my hands from shaking. When I finally went inside, the clerk behind the counter looked up at me with concern. She was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her name tag said Delora. "You all right, hun?" she asked. "You look like you have seen a ghost." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I just shook my head and asked for a cup of coffee. Delora poured the coffee and set it on the counter. She did not take her eyes off me. "I have seen that look before," she said. "Drivers come in here sometimes looking just like you do now. Shaking. Pale. Like something scared them half to death out on that highway." I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into my cold fingers. "What did they tell you?" I asked. Delora shrugged. "Different things. Some say they saw lights in the sky. Some say they heard voices on their radio. Some say they saw someone standing by the road." She paused, studying my face. "That last one. That is what you saw, is it not?" I did not answer. I did not have to. Delora leaned forward, lowering her voice even though there was no one else in the store. "Mile marker 88, am I right?" I stared at her. "How did you know?" "Because that is what they all say," she replied. Every single one of them, mile marker 88. A man standing by the road. A man with no face. She told me to be careful. She told me to take a different route if I could, or to drive past that stretch of highway during daylight. She told me that other drivers had seen the same thing, going back years, decades, that some of them had stopped, like I had, and that most of them were fine. But some of them were not. Some of them kept seeing him, she said. On every run, at every mile marker, getting closer each time. She shook her head. "I do not know what happens when he gets close enough. Nobody does. The drivers who find out do not come back to tell about it." I paid for my coffee and went back to my truck. I sat in the cab for another hour, watching the other customers come and go, watching the headlights on the highway, watching the normal world go about its normal business. And then I started my engine and drove the rest of the way to Phoenix. I did not take the highway. I took the long way, the back roads that wound through small towns and farmland and added 3 hours to my trip. Clara was awake when I got home, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of tea and a worried expression. She knew something was wrong. She always knows. I told her what had happened. All of it. The man at mile marker 88. The faceless shadow. The way he had moved without moving. She listened without interrupting, and when I was finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. "I told you," she said quietly. I told you not to take that highway." "I know," I said, "I know." She squeezed my hand. "Will you listen to me now?" I nodded. Yes, I will listen. But even as I said it, I knew it was not that simple. The highway was part of my regular route. Avoiding it would mean longer drives, less money, more time away from home. And part of me, a small but insistent part, wanted to go back. Wanted to see if the man was still there. Wanted to understand what I had experienced. I tried to ignore that part. I tried to tell myself that I would never drive that stretch of highway again. Never pass mile marker 88. Never see that faceless figure standing in the darkness. But 3 nights later, I was back on the road, and the highway was calling. 3 days was all I could manage. 3 days of taking the long routes, the back roads, the detours that added hours to my runs and cut into my pay. 3 days of telling myself that I was being smart, being careful, being the kind of driver who listens to warnings and stays out of trouble. 3 days of lying to myself. On the 4th day, I took the highway. I told myself it was practical. The load I was hauling needed to be in Albuquerque by morning, and the back roads would not get me there in time. I told myself it was financial. I could not keep losing money on every run, not with Clara's medical bills and the mortgage and all the other expenses that pile up when you are not looking. I told myself it was rational. What I had seen at mile marker 88 had been a trick of the light, a product of exhaustion, a story I had built up in my mind until it seemed more real than it was. But the truth was simpler than any of that. I needed to know. I needed to know if he was still there. I needed to know if I had imagined the whole thing. I needed to know what would happen if I saw him again. So I took the highway. The October sun was just touching the western horizon when I passed the fuel station where I had met Delora. I thought about stopping, thought about asking her more questions about the man at mile marker 88, but I did not. I was not sure I wanted to hear the answers. The highway stretched out before me, empty and familiar. I had driven this road so many times that I knew every curve, every dip, every place where the asphalt had buckled from the summer heat. I knew where the cell service dropped out and where the radio stations faded into static. I knew where the truckers stopped and where they did not. I knew this road the way I knew my own hands on the steering wheel. But tonight, it felt different. The desert seemed darker than usual, even though the sky was still streaked with the last light of day. The scrubland on either side of the highway seemed to press closer, as if the road were narrowing. The mile markers seemed to be spaced farther apart, counting down more slowly than they should. I checked my speed. 65, same as always. I checked my mirrors. Empty road behind me, same as always. I turned on the CB radio and scanned through the channels, listening for other drivers. Channel 19 was quiet. Channel 17 was quiet. Channel 14 had a faint voice that faded before I could make out the words. I settled on Channel 19 and listened to the static, letting the white noise fill the cab. Mile marker 100, 95. 90. The sun disappeared behind the mesas, and the darkness came on fast, the way it does in the desert. One moment there was light on the horizon. The next moment there was nothing but the twin beams of my headlights and the stars beginning to appear overhead. I turned on my running lights and checked my mirrors again. Still empty. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I wiped them on my jeans and told myself to relax. Told myself there was nothing out here but the road and the night and the long drive ahead. Told myself that I was a professional, that I had been doing this for 16 years, that I did not get spooked by shadows and stories. Mile marker 89. I slowed down. I could not help it. My foot eased off the accelerator the same way it had 3 nights ago, without conscious thought, without intention. The speedometer needle dropped. 60. 55, 50. The mile marker appeared in my headlights. He was there, standing in the same spot, the same rigid posture, the same black clothes that absorbed the light, the same faceless shadow where his features should have been, but he was closer to the road. 3 nights ago, he had been standing at the edge of the shoulder, where the asphalt met the scrubland. Now he was standing on the shoulder itself, maybe 10 feet from the edge of the driving lane. If a car drifted even slightly to the right, it would hit him. I did not stop this time. I pressed the accelerator and drove past mile marker 88 at 60 miles per hour. My eyes locked on the road ahead, my hands gripping the wheel so hard that my knuckles turned white. I did not look in my mirrors. I did not want to see him standing there watching me pass. I did not want to see if he moved, but I heard something. A sound from the CB radio. Not static, not a voice, something else. A low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat or a drumbeat or the ticking of a clock. It came through the speaker in short bursts, regular and deliberate, as if someone were pressing the transmit button in a pattern. I grabbed the handset. "This is Maddox hauling eastbound on 666. Who is on this frequency?" The pulsing stopped. For a moment there was silence, and then a voice came through the speaker, so faint and distorted that I could barely make out the words. Mile marker 80. The voice faded into static. I switched to channel 17. The pulsing followed me. I switched to channel 14. Same thing. Channel 9, channel 6, channel 3. Every frequency I tried, the pulsing was there, steady and patient, like it was waiting for me to stop running. I turned off the radio and drove the rest of the way to Albuquerque in silence. The next morning, I went to the New Mexico State Police office in Albuquerque and asked to speak with someone about Highway 666. The officer at the front desk looked at me like I was wasting his time, but he made a call and told me to wait. 20 minutes later, a man in a khaki uniform came out to meet me. He was in his 50s, with a weathered face and gray hair cut short in a military style. His badge said Bishop. His handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp, the kind of eyes that had seen things and remembered them. "Hal Bishop," he said. "Road Patrol. What can I do for you?" I told him about the man at mile marker 88. I told him about seeing the figure twice, about the way it had moved closer to the road, about the pulsing on the CB radio. I told him everything, even though I knew how it sounded, even though I knew he would probably think I was crazy. Bishop listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking at me with those sharp eyes. Then he nodded slowly, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. "You are not the first driver to report this," he said. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that I was not losing my mind. Dread at what that meant. "How many others?" I asked. Bishop shook his head. "More than I can count. Going back years, always the same story. Man standing at mile marker 88, no face, gets closer every time they pass. What happens when he gets close enough?" Bishop did not answer right away. He looked past me, toward the window, towards the highway that I could not see, but that we both knew was out there, waiting. "I do not know," he said finally. "The drivers who find out do not come back to tell us." He told me more. Told me that the reports went back at least 30 years, maybe longer. That the man at mile marker 88 seemed to appear to certain drivers and not others, though no one had figured out the pattern. That the drivers who saw him once usually saw him again. And again. And again. Each time closer. Each time harder to ignore. Some of them stopped driving that highway. Bishop said. Take other routes, change jobs, do whatever they have to do to stay away from that stretch of road. Those are the smart ones, and the others? Bishop's jaw tightened. The others keep driving. They tell themselves it is not real, or they get curious, or they just cannot afford to take the long way around. So they keep passing mile marker 88, and the man keeps getting closer, and one day... He did not finish the sentence. One day what? I asked. Bishop looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. He opened it and spread several photographs on the desk between us. The photographs showed trucks, rigs like mine pulled over on the shoulder of a highway. Some of them had their doors open. Some of them had their lights still on. All of them were empty. These are from the past 5 years, Bishop said. Trucks found abandoned on Highway 6666, within a mile of marker 88. No sign of the driver. No sign of struggle. No explanation. I looked at the photographs. Looked at the rigs sitting empty on the shoulder, waiting for drivers who would never come back. Looked at the mile markers visible in some of the shots, the green signs with white numbers that I had driven past 100 times without thinking. Mile marker 87, mile marker 88, mile marker 89. What happened to them? I asked, though I was not sure I wanted to know. Bishop gathered the photographs and put them back in the folder. That is what I'm trying to find out, he said. But I'm going to tell you the same thing I tell every driver who comes in here with this story. Stay off that highway, especially at night, especially alone. I cannot, I said. It is my route. It is my job. Bishop nodded like he had heard that before. Then be careful. Do not stop at mile marker 88, no matter what you see. Do not try to talk to him. Do not try to understand what he is. And if the pulsing comes over your radio again... He paused. What? I asked. Turn it off, he said. And do not turn it back on until you are off that highway. He gave me his card and told me to call if I saw anything else. Told me he would be in touch if he learned anything new. Told me to be smart and stay safe and all the other things that people say when they know the situation is bad, but they do not know how to fix it. I thanked him and drove back to Phoenix. I tried to take Bishop's advice. I tried to stay off the highway at night, to make my runs during daylight when the desert was bright, and the road was busy, and there was no reason to be afraid. For 2 weeks I scheduled my load so that I would pass mile marker 88 in the afternoon, when the sun was high and other trucks were on the road. It worked. For 2 weeks I did not see the man. Did not hear the pulsing on my radio, did not feel that creeping dread that had settled into my bones the first night I stopped at mile marker 88. I started to think that maybe Bishop was right, that maybe staying off the highway at night was enough, that maybe I could keep driving this route and keep my sanity and keep my job as long as I was careful. Then dispatch called with a rush load. Industrial equipment needed in Albuquerque by 6 a.m. I would have to drive through the night. I would have to pass mile marker 88 in the dark. I thought about refusing. Thought about telling dispatch that I was sick, that my truck was having problems, that I could not make the run. But the pay was good, and I needed the money, and some part of me, that same part that had made me stop at mile marker 88 the first night, wanted to see if he was still there. I left Phoenix at 8 p.m. and headed east on Highway 666. The night was clear and cold, the stars bright above the desert, the road empty ahead of me. I turned on the CB radio and listened to the static, half expecting to hear that pulsing again. But the airwaves were quiet, just the soft hiss of empty frequencies and the occasional crackle of distant lightning. I passed the fuel station where I had met Delora. Her shift must have ended because the lot was empty except for a single car parked by the pumps. I thought about stopping anyway, thought about asking whoever was working if they had heard any stories, but I did not. I kept driving. mile marker 100. 95, 90. The desert pressed close on either side of the highway, dark and silent and vast. I checked my mirrors and saw nothing but the glow of my own taillights reflected on the empty asphalt. I checked my fuel gauge and saw that I had plenty to make it to Albuquerque without stopping. I checked the clock on my dashboard and saw that it was 11:47 p.m. The same time I had first seen him. Mile marker 89. I did not slow down this time. I kept my foot on the accelerator and my eyes on the road, and my hands steady on the wheel. I told myself that I was not afraid. Told myself that I was just a trucker doing his job, driving his route, hauling his load. Told myself that whatever was out there at mile marker 88, it could not touch me if I did not let it. The mile marker appeared in my headlights. He was there, standing in the driving lane. I swerved. The rig lurched to the left, the trailer swaying behind me, the tires screaming on the asphalt. I fought the wheel, trying to keep the truck from jackknifing, trying to keep 40 tons of steel and cargo from flipping over and rolling across the desert. For a long, terrible moment, I was not in control. The truck was moving on its own, physics and momentum taking over, and all I could do was hold on and pray. Then the tires caught and the rig straightened, and I was back in control, breathing hard, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked in my mirror and saw mile marker 88 receding behind me, the green sign with white numbers growing smaller and smaller in the darkness. The man was gone, but on the CB radio the pulsing had started again, slow and steady like a heartbeat, like a clock counting down, like something patient and relentless that knew it had all the time in the world. I reached for the radio to turn it off, the way Bishop had told me. But before my hand touched the dial, a voice came through the speaker. Not the faint, distorted voice I had heard before. This voice was clear and close, as if whoever was speaking was right there in the cab with me. "Reeves," the voice said, and then silence. I drove the rest of the way to Albuquerque with the radio off and the windows down, letting the cold desert air fill the cab and keep me awake. I delivered my load at dawn and called Clara from a truck stop payphone, just to hear her voice, just to remind myself that there was a world outside of that highway, and that darkness, and that faceless figure standing in the road. She asked me if I was all right. I told her I was fine. I was lying. That night, I called Hal Bishop. I told him what had happened. Told him that the man had been standing in the driving lane, that I had almost wrecked trying to avoid him, that the voice on the radio had said my name. Bishop was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that I did not understand, something that did not make sense until later, until it was too late. He said, "Do not drive that highway alone anymore. Find another driver, someone who can follow you, someone who can see what you see." "Why?" I asked. "Because if someone else sees him," Bishop said, "it means he is real. And if he is real, maybe we can stop him." I asked Bishop if he would come with me, if he would drive the highway and see the man for himself. He said no. He said he had already seen him, 20 years ago, when he was a trucker himself, before he joined the road patrol. He said he had seen the man at mile marker 88 3 times, each time closer than before. He said he had quit trucking and taken a job with the state police so he would never have to drive that highway again. "But you still investigate it," I said. "You still collect reports and photographs and try to figure out what is happening." Bishop was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I have to, because it is my fault those drivers disappeared." I did not understand what he meant, not then, but I would. Bishop's words stayed with me for days. It is my fault those drivers disappeared. I did not understand what he meant, but I could not stop thinking about it. Could not stop turning it over in my mind, trying to make sense of it. Bishop had been a trucker 20 years ago. He had seen the man at mile marker 88 3 times. He had quit and joined the road patrol, and somehow, in some way I did not yet understand, he blamed himself for the drivers who had vanished on that highway. I called him back 2 days later, asked him to explain, asked him to tell me what he meant. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Come to my office, I will show you." I drove to Albuquerque that afternoon. Bishop was waiting for me in a small room at the back of the state police building, surrounded by filing cabinets and stacks of papers and a corkboard covered with photographs and maps and handwritten notes. It looked less like a police office and more like the workspace of someone obsessed. Someone who had been chasing the same questions for 20 years and still had not found the answers. He closed the door behind me and gestured for me to sit. "What I am about to tell you does not leave this room," he said. "You understand?" I nodded. Bishop sat down across from me and folded his hands on the desk. He looked tired. Older than he had seemed when I first met him, like a man carrying a weight that had been pressing down on him for a very long time. 23 years ago, he said, I was driving for a freight company out of Tucson. Long-haul runs, mostly. Phoenix to Albuquerque, Albuquerque to El Paso, the usual routes. I was young, thought I knew everything, thought nothing on that highway could touch me. He paused. Then I saw him. First time was in October, just like you. Mile marker 88. Man standing by the road, no face, just standing there like he was waiting for something. I drove past and did not think much of it. Figured it was a hitchhiker or a stranded motorist. But something about him stuck with me. Something I could not shake. Second time was a week later, Bishop continued. Same spot, same man, same posture. But this time he was closer to the road, standing on the shoulder instead of beside it. And this time I stopped. He looked at me. "Same as you," he said. Got out of my truck and walked toward him. Got maybe 15 feet away before I realized something was wrong. Before I saw that his face was not there, and then he trailed off. "And then what?" I asked. Bishop shook his head. "And then I ran. Got back in my truck and drove away as fast as I could. Did not stop until I was in Albuquerque. Did not sleep that night. Did not sleep for 3 nights, actually. Just kept seeing that face, that empty space where his face should have been." He took a breath. Third time was 2 weeks after that, he said. I had been avoiding the highway, taking the back roads, losing money on every run. But I needed the work, so I took a night load. Told myself I would just drive fast and not look at mile marker 88 when I passed it. Told myself I would be fine. He was not fine. I could see it in his eyes. He was in the road, Bishop said, standing right in the middle of my lane. I swerved to miss him and lost control of the rig. Went off the highway and rolled the trailer. Broke 3 ribs and fractured my collarbone. Was in the hospital for 2 weeks. He leaned back in his chair. That is when I quit trucking, could not do it anymore. Could not get back on that highway knowing he was out there, knowing he was getting closer every time I passed. So I joined the road patrol instead. Figured if I could not drive the highway, at least I could help other drivers who were having the same experience. He gestured at the corkboard behind him, at the photographs and maps and notes. "That is what all this is," he said. 20 years of reports. 20 years of drivers telling me the same story I lived through. Man at mile marker 88, no face, gets closer every time. I've been documenting it, trying to find a pattern, trying to figure out what he is and what he wants and how to stop him. "Have you found anything?" I asked. Bishop nodded slowly. "One thing, one pattern that took me 15 years to notice." He stood up and walked to the corkboard, pointed at a map of Highway 666 with red pins stuck into it at various points. Every driver who has seen him, Bishop said, has also heard something on their CB radio, a pulsing sound, a heartbeat, and sometimes a voice. I felt cold. The same thing had happened to me. The voice says different things to different drivers, Bishop continued. Sometimes it is just static that sounds like words. Sometimes it is actual words, but they do not make sense. And sometimes, he looked at me. Sometimes it says your name. I remembered the voice on my radio, clear and close, like someone sitting in the cab with me, saying my name. Reeves. What does it mean? I asked. Bishop shook his head. I do not know, but I have a theory. He walked back to his desk and sat down. I think he chooses people, Bishop said. The man at mile marker 88. I think he appears to certain drivers and not others because he is looking for something, or someone. And when he finds what he is looking for, he stopped. He what? I asked. Bishop's jaw tightened. He takes them. The drivers who disappear. The ones whose trucks are found empty on the shoulder. I think he takes them because they are the ones he was looking for all along. I thought about the photographs Bishop had shown me. The empty trucks. The missing drivers, the mile markers in the background. Why do you think it is your fault? I asked. Bishop was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because I told them to go back. I did not understand. The first few drivers who came to me with this story, Bishop explained, I did not believe them. Thought they were tired or drunk, or just trying to explain away their own bad driving. So I told them to get back on the highway. Told them there was nothing out there. Told them they were imagining things. He looked down at his hands. 3 of them disappeared, he said. 3 drivers who came to me for help, and I sent them back out there. Back to mile marker 88. Back to him. He raised his eyes to meet mine. That is why I tell drivers to stay off the highway now. That is why I tell them to take the back roads, find other routes, do whatever they have to do to avoid that stretch of road. Because I know what happens to the ones who do not listen. I have seen it too many times. I sat there in silence, processing what he had told me. 20 years of guilt. 20 years of trying to understand something that did not make sense. 20 years of warning drivers about a danger he could not explain and could not stop. You said I should find another driver, I said, finally. Someone to follow me. Someone who can see what I see. Why? Bishop leaned forward. Because that is the one thing I have never tried. Every driver who has seen the man at mile marker 88 has been alone. Every truck that has been found empty on the shoulder was the only vehicle in the area. What if that is part of it? What if he can only take people who are alone? He spread his hands. It is just a theory. But if you can find another driver who is willing to follow you on that highway, someone who can watch your truck and see what happens when you pass mile marker 88, maybe we can learn something. Maybe we can figure out how to stop him. I thought about it. Thought about asking another trucker to follow me on a midnight run down a highway where people disappeared. Thought about trying to explain the man with no face and the pulsing on the radio and the voice that knew my name. I will try, I said. Bishop nodded. Be careful. And Maddox, he paused. If you see him again, do not stop. No matter what. Do not get out of your truck. Just keep driving. I told him I understood, but understanding and doing are 2 different things. Finding another driver was harder than I expected. Most of the truckers I knew thought the stories about Highway 6666 were just that. Stories. Legends that drivers told to pass the time on long hauls. When I tried to explain what I had seen, what I had heard, they looked at me the way Bishop said he used to look at drivers who came to him with the same story. like I was tired or drunk or losing my grip. A few of them were polite about it, said they would think about it, said they would let me know. But I could see in their eyes that they were not going to follow me anywhere, and especially not down a highway in the middle of the night where people vanished without explanation. One driver, a guy I had known for years named Tolliver, flat out told me I was crazy. Said I needed to take some time off and get my head straight before I hurt myself or someone else. I almost gave up. Then I met Delora again. I stopped at her fuel station on a Tuesday afternoon on my way back from a run to Flagstaff. She was behind the counter when I walked in, and she recognized me immediately. The look on her face told me she remembered our conversation, remembered what I had told her about the man at mile marker 88. "You are still driving that highway," she said. It was not a question. I nodded. She shook her head. "You need to stop." "I know," I said, "but I cannot, not yet." I told her about Bishop, about his theory that the man could only take drivers who were alone, about my need to find someone who would follow me, who would watch and see what happened when I passed mile marker 88. Delora listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, looking at me with those tired eyes that had seen too many drivers come through with the same story. Then she said, "My husband drove truck for 30 years. I waited. He disappeared on Highway 666, she said. 8 years ago. They found his rig at mile marker 87, engine still running, doors standing open. They never found him. I did not know what to say." Delora looked past me, toward the highway visible through the fuel station windows. "I will follow you," she said, "tonight. I want to see what he saw." I tried to talk her out of it. Told her it was too dangerous. Told her I could not be responsible for putting her in harm's way. Told her to let me find another trucker, someone with a rig, someone who could handle whatever we might encounter. But she would not listen. "He took my husband," she said. "I have spent 8 years not knowing what happened to him. 8 years imagining the worst. If there is a chance I can see what he saw, understand what happened to him, I have to take it." I could not argue with that. We made a plan. I would drive my rig east on Highway 686 at midnight. Delora would follow in her car, staying about a quarter mile behind me, close enough to see my truck but far enough to have room to react if something happened. We would both have our CB radios on, tuned to Channel 9, so we could communicate. And when we reached mile marker 88, she would watch. "Just watch," I told her. "Do not stop. Do not get out of your car. If you see something, you tell me over the radio, and then you drive straight to Albuquerque and call Bishop. You understand?" She understood. That night, I pulled out of the fuel station at 11:30 p.m. Delora waited 5 minutes and then followed. I could see her headlights in my mirror, small and distant but steady, tracking my movements as I drove east into the darkness. The highway was empty. The desert was dark. The stars were bright overhead, and the air coming through my vents was cold and dry and smelled like sage. I kept my eyes on the road and my hands on the wheel and my radio tuned to Channel 9. Mile marker 100. 9590. Delora's voice came over the radio. "I am still behind you. Everything looks normal." "Copy that," I said. "Stay sharp." Mile marker 89. I felt my pulse quicken, felt my hands tighten on the wheel, felt that familiar dread creeping up my spine, the same dread I had felt every time I approached this stretch of highway. The mile marker appeared in my headlights. He was there, standing on the shoulder, closer than before, maybe 5 feet from the edge of my lane. That rigid posture, those black clothes, that empty space where his face should have been. I did not slow down. I did not stop. I drove past him at 60 miles per hour, my eyes locked on the road ahead, my breath coming fast and shallow. Then I grabbed the radio. "Delora, did you see him? Did you see anything at mile marker 88? Static. "Delora, come in. Are you there?" More static, and then, faintly, her voice. I saw something. What? What did you see?" But she did not answer. Her voice faded into the static, and no matter how many times I called her name, she did not respond. I looked in my mirror. Her headlights were gone. I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder. Sat there in the darkness, staring at my mirror, waiting for her headlights to appear, waiting for her voice to come back over the radio, waiting for some sign that she was still there. Nothing. I turned my rig around and drove back toward mile marker 88. Drove slowly, scanning both sides of the highway, looking for her car, looking for any sign of what had happened. I found her car at mile marker 87. It was pulled over on the shoulder, engine still running, driver's door standing open. Just like her husband's truck 8 years ago. Delora was gone. I called Bishop from the side of the highway, standing beside her empty car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Told him what had happened. Told him she had been following me, had been right behind me, and then she was gone. Bishop was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "It is not your fault." But I knew it was. I had brought her out here. I had asked her to follow me. I had put her in the path of whatever was waiting at mile marker 88, and now she was gone the same way her husband had gone. The same way all those other drivers had gone. Bishop said he would send units to search for her, said he would do everything he could, said I should go home and let him handle it. I drove back to Phoenix in a daze. Did not stop for fuel, did not stop for food, did not stop at all until I was pulling into my driveway, turning off the engine, sitting in the silence of my cab with the weight of what had happened pressing down on me like a physical thing. Clara was waiting for me at the door. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told her everything, and then I told her I was going back. Clara begged me not to go. She stood in the kitchen doorway with tears in her eyes and told me I was being a fool. Told me I was throwing my life away. Told me that whatever was out there on that highway, it was not worth dying for. I told her I understood, but I also told her I had to go back. Delora was gone because of me, because I had asked her to follow me, because I had put her in the path of something I did not understand and could not explain. If there was any chance I could find her, any chance I could understand what had happened to her and her husband and all those other drivers, I had to take it. Clara shook her head. "You are not going to find her, Reeves. You are going to end up just like her, just like all of them." And then what happens to me? I did not have an answer for that. She walked over to me and put her hands on my chest. Looked up at me with those eyes I had fallen in love with 20 years ago. "Please," she said, "stay home. Let the police handle it. Let Bishop handle it. You do not have to be the one who goes back." But I did. I was the one who had seen him. I was the one who had heard my name on the radio. I was the one he was waiting for. I kissed her forehead and told her I would be back by morning. Then I got in my truck and drove east. The night was cold and clear. No moon. No clouds. Just the stars and the highway and the darkness pressing in on all sides. I had called Bishop before I left and told him what I was planning. He had tried to talk me out of it, same as Clara, but I could hear in his voice that he knew it was useless. He knew I was going to do it whether he approved or not. "Just promise me one thing," he had said. "If you see him, do not stop. Do not get out of your truck. No matter what happens, you keep driving." I had promised, but promises are easy to make and hard to keep when you are staring into that faceless darkness and trying to understand what you are seeing. I passed the fuel station at 11:15 p.m. The lights were on, but the parking lot was empty. Someone else was working the counter tonight. Someone who did not know Delora, did not know what had happened to her, did not know that she had followed me down this highway and vanished without a trace. I kept driving, mile marker 100, 95, 90. The CB radio was silent. No static, no pulsing, no voices, just the empty hiss of dead air, as if every other driver in the world had abandoned this frequency and left me alone. I checked my mirrors. Empty highway behind me. I checked my fuel gauge. 3/4 full. I checked the clock on my dashboard. 11:47 p.m. Mile marker 89. I slowed down, not because I wanted to, because I had to, because some part of me knew that this was the last time I would pass this stretch of highway, and I needed to see what was waiting for me. The mile marker appeared in my headlights. He was there, standing in the middle of the road, both lanes, right on the center line, that rigid posture, those black clothes, that empty space where his face should have been. I stopped the truck. I do not know why. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to keep driving, to swerve around him and floor the accelerator and not look back. But my foot found the brake and pressed down, and the rig shuddered to a halt maybe 50 feet from where he was standing. We faced each other in the darkness, my headlights illuminating his body but not his face, that shadow clinging to his features like it was part of him. Like the darkness was not something that fell on him, but something that came from him. For a long moment, nothing happened. He stood there. I sat in my cab. The engine idled. The stars burned overhead. The desert stretched out on either side of us, vast and empty and indifferent. Then the CB radio crackled to life. Not static this time, not pulsing. A voice, clear and close, like someone sitting right next to me. Reeves. I grabbed the handset. "Who is this? What do you want?" The voice did not answer my question. Instead, it said something that made my blood turn to ice. "She is still here. Delora." He was talking about Delora. "Where?" I said into the radio. "Where is she?" The voice was silent for a moment. Then it said, mile marker 88. I looked at the man standing in the road, looked at the mile marker behind him, the green sign with white numbers glowing in the reflected light from my headlights. 88. "She is not there," I said. I looked. The police looked. There is nothing at mile marker 88 but empty highway. The voice came back, patient and cold. "She is here. They are all here. Everyone who ever stopped for me. Everyone who ever looked into my face and tried to understand what they were seeing. They are all here." I felt something shift in my chest, a tightness, a pressure, like my heart was being squeezed by a hand I could not see. "What are you?" I asked. The voice did not answer. "What do you want?" Still nothing. I sat there in the cab of my truck, staring at the figure in the road, waiting for an answer that did not come. The radio hissed softly. The engine rumbled. The night pressed in. Then the man moved. Not toward me, not away from me. He simply turned, slowly, deliberately, like a door swinging on a hinge. He turned until he was facing the side of the highway, facing the desert, facing something I could not see. And then he raised his arm and pointed. I followed the line of his finger with my eyes, looked out into the darkness beyond the shoulder of the highway, beyond the scrubland and the rocks and the empty desert. At first I did not see anything, just darkness, just the night. But then slowly I began to make out shapes, forms, figures standing in the desert scattered across the landscape like trees or posts or stones. Dozens of them, maybe more, all of them standing perfectly still, facing the highway, facing me. all of them with that same faceless shadow where their features should have been. I understood then, understood what Bishop had been trying to tell me, understood what the voice on the radio meant when it said they are all here. The drivers who had disappeared, the ones whose trucks were found empty on the shoulder. They had not been taken somewhere else. They had not been killed or kidnapped or driven away. They were still here, still standing at mile marker 88, still waiting. For what, I did not know, and I did not want to find out. I put my truck in gear and pressed the accelerator. The rig lurched forward, straight toward the man in the road. I did not swerve. I did not try to go around him. I drove straight at him, my hands locked on the wheel, my foot pressed to the floor, my eyes fixed on that faceless figure standing in my path. He did not move. The truck hit him at 40 miles per hour. Or it should have. But there was no impact. No collision. No sound of a body hitting the grill or going under the wheels. The man simply was not there anymore. One moment he was standing in the road, and the next moment I was past him, driving east on the empty highway, leaving mile marker 88 behind me. I looked in my mirror. He was standing in the road behind me. Same spot, same posture, same faceless shadow. As if I had never hit him, as if he had never moved at all. And standing beside him, small and distant but unmistakable in the glow of my taillights, was another figure. A woman, Delora. She was facing away from me, looking out at the desert, at the other figure standing there in the darkness. She was not moving, was not calling for help, was not trying to flag me down or signal me or do anything that might suggest she wanted to be rescued. She was just standing there, the same way the man was standing there, the same way all of them were standing there. I slowed down. I almost stopped, almost turned around, almost went back for her. But then the radio crackled again. "Do not stop, Reeves." It was Bishop's voice. I had not realized he was on the frequency. "I know what you are seeing," Bishop said. "I know you want to go back for her, but you cannot. If you stop now, you will end up just like them, just like all of them." I looked at Delora in my mirror, looked at her standing there beside the faceless man, motionless and silent and lost. "I cannot just leave her," I said. "You already did," Bishop said. "The moment she disappeared, she was gone. What you are seeing now is not Delora anymore. It is just what is left." I did not understand, did not want to understand. But I knew he was right. I had seen it with my own eyes. Delora had been following me in her car. She had been right behind me. And then she was gone. Whatever had happened to her had happened in an instant, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. There was no saving her. There never had been. I turned my eyes back to the road and kept driving. I delivered my load in Albuquerque at dawn, parked my rig at the depot and walked to the dispatch office to sign the paperwork. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. Anyone looking at me would have seen just another trucker finishing just another run. They would not have seen what I was carrying inside. Bishop met me at a diner near the depot. He looked like he had not slept. Looked like he had been sitting by his radio all night, listening to the silence on Channel 9, waiting to hear my voice or not hear it. I told him what I had seen, the man in the road, the figures in the desert, Delora standing beside them, motionless and silent. Bishop listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "That is more than anyone else has ever seen," he said. "Most drivers who get that close do not come back to tell about it." "I almost did not come back," I said. "I almost went back for her." Bishop shook his head. "It would not have mattered. You cannot save them. Once they are out there, they are part of it, part of whatever he is." "What is he?" I asked. Bishop was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I do not know. I have been trying to figure that out for 20 years. But I think he is something that was always there, something that has always been part of that highway. And I think the people he takes, they become part of it too. He looked at me. That is why you cannot go back, he said. That is why you have to stop driving that highway. Because he has seen you now. He knows you. And if you keep passing mile marker 88, sooner or later, you're going to end up standing out there with the rest of them. I thought about what he was saying. Thought about the faceless figures in the desert, standing there in the darkness, waiting for something that might never come. Thought about Delora and her husband and all those other drivers, lost on a highway that they had driven 100 times before. I thought about Clara, waiting for me at home, not knowing if I was alive or dead. I told Bishop I would stop driving Highway 666. Told him I would find other routes, other loads, other ways to make a living. Told him I was done with mile marker 88 and the man who waited there. He nodded. Good, he said. That is the smart thing to do. But we both knew it was not that simple. Because the man at mile marker 88 had seen me, had spoken my name, had shown me what happened to the drivers who stopped for him, and I could not stop thinking about it. It has been 6 months since that night. I have not driven Highway 6666 since, have not passed mile marker 88, have not seen the man or heard the pulsing on my radio, or felt that creeping dread that settled into my bones every time I approached that stretch of road. But I have not stopped thinking about it either. About Delora, about her husband, about all those drivers standing in the desert, faceless and silent, waiting for something I do not understand. I have not stopped wondering what would have happened if I had gone back for her. If I had stopped my truck and walked out into the desert and tried to bring her home, would I have saved her? Would I have become like her? Would I have finally seen the face behind that shadow and understood what I was looking at? I do not know. I will never know, but sometimes, late at night, when I am driving alone on some other highway in some other part of the country, I hear something on my CB radio. A low hum, a pulsing, a heartbeat. And sometimes, very faintly, I hear a voice. Reeves, it says, mile marker 88. I turn off the radio and keep driving. Tell myself it is just interference, just static. Just my imagination filling in the silence with sounds that are not there. But I know the truth. He is still waiting. They are all still waiting. And one of these nights, I am going to stop driving away. I am going to turn around and go back to that highway and that mile marker and that faceless man standing in the road. Not because I want to, not because I think I can save anyone, but because some roads only go one way, and I have been on this one for too long to get off now. The first time I saw Opal Strand, she was standing in the rain at a rest stop that should not have been open. My name is Virgil Harker, and I have been driving truck for 19 years. In that time, I have learned that the highway has its own rules, its own rhythms, its own way of telling you when something is wrong. Most of the time, you listen to those signals and stay out of trouble. But sometimes, especially on the long night runs when you're tired and alone, and the road stretches out before you like an endless black ribbon, you ignore them. That November night, I ignored them. I was hauling a load of machine parts from El Paso to Amarillo, a run I had made probably 200 times over the years. The route takes you through some of the flattest, emptiest country in Texas, where the wind blows constant, and the horizon is so far away that you start to wonder if you are moving at all. It is the kind of landscape that can play tricks on your mind if you let it. I had left El Paso at 6 p.m., planning to drive straight through and reach Amarillo before midnight. The weather had been clear when I started, but around 9 p.m., the sky opened up and the rain came down so hard that I could barely see the road in front of me. I slowed down and turned on my hazards, watching the mile markers crawl past at half of my normal speed. My CB radio crackled with chatter from other drivers complaining about the weather. Most of them were pulling over to wait it out. But I had a delivery deadline and a dispatcher who did not accept excuses, so I kept driving. Around 10 p.m., I passed a sign for a rest stop that I did not recognize. The sign said Pine Ridge Rest Area, 2 miles, with an arrow pointing to the right. I had driven this route hundreds of times, and I had never seen a rest stop at this location. But I needed fuel and coffee, and a chance to stretch my legs, so I took the exit. The road to the rest stop was narrow and poorly lit, with trees pressing close on either side. Not pines, despite the name. Mesquite and juniper, the usual scrubland vegetation of West Texas. The rain was still coming down hard, turning the asphalt into a river and reducing visibility to almost nothing. The rest stop appeared out of the darkness like a mirage. A small building with a covered pavilion, a few parking spots, and a single light pole casting a weak yellow glow over the empty lot. There were no other vehicles, no other trucks, just the rain and the darkness and that single light. I parked my rig and sat in the cab for a moment, watching the rain stream down my windshield. Something felt wrong about this place. The building looked old, like it had not been maintained in years. The light pole was flickering. The parking lot had cracks running through it where weeds had pushed up through the asphalt. But I needed to get out of the cab, needed to move my legs and clear my head. So I grabbed my jacket and stepped down into the rain. That was when I saw her. She was standing under the pavilion just outside the reach of the rain. A woman, maybe in her 40s, with dark hair plastered to her face and clothes that were soaked through. She was not wearing a jacket, was not carrying a bag, was just standing there, arms wrapped around herself, watching me. I walked toward her, hunching my shoulders against the rain. "You all right, ma'am?" I called out. "You need some help?" She did not answer, just watched me approach with eyes that seemed too dark, too still, too knowing. I stopped a few feet away from her. She was shivering, but there was something controlled about it, like she was aware of the cold but not bothered by it. Her face was pale and drawn, with sharp cheekbones and thin lips pressed together in a line that might have been a smile, or might have been something else entirely. "I'm Virgil," I said. "I'm a trucker. Are you stranded out here? Do you need a ride?" She looked at me for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was low and flat, without any of the urgency or gratitude you would expect from someone who had been standing in the rain at an empty rest stop in the middle of the night. "My name is Opal," she said. "Opal Strand. And yes, I need a ride. Where are you headed?" She tilted her head slightly, as if the question surprised her. "Amarillo," she said, "same as you." I had not told her where I was going. I stood there in the rain, looking at this woman who knew my destination without being told, and I felt that signal again. That warning from the highway that something was wrong, that I should get back in my truck and drive away and forget I had ever seen this rest stop or this woman standing alone in the darkness. But I did not. I told myself she had probably overheard me on the CB radio. Told myself there was a reasonable explanation for how she knew where I was headed. Told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself a lot of things. "Come on," I said. "You can ride up front with me." She followed me to my truck without a word. I opened the passenger door for her, and she climbed up into the cab, moving with a strange, careful grace, like someone who was not used to climbing into trucks but was figuring it out as she went. I went around to my side and got in, shaking the rain out of my hair. We sat there for a moment in the warmth of the cab, the rain drumming on the roof, the engine idling. I looked over at Opal. She was staring straight ahead through the windshield, her hands folded in her lap, her face expressionless. You want to tell me what you were doing out here? I asked. She did not look at me. Waiting, she said. For what? For you. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. I told myself she meant she was waiting for any driver, anyone who might come along and give her a ride. But the way she said it, the certainty in her voice made it sound like something else entirely. Like she had been waiting specifically for me. I put the truck in gear and pulled out of the rest stop. The rain was still coming down hard, and I had to concentrate on the road, which gave me an excuse not to talk for a while. But I could feel Opal watching me, could feel her eyes on the side of my face, studying me, measuring me. After about 10 miles, she spoke again. You're going to want to take Route 54 north at the next junction. I glanced at her. That is not the fastest route to Amarillo. No, she said, but it is the one you need to take tonight. Why? She did not answer. Just kept looking straight ahead, her hands folded in her lap, her face as blank as a mask. I thought about arguing with her, thought about telling her that I knew this route better than she did, that I had been driving it for 19 years, that I did not need directions from a stranger I had picked up at a rest stop that should not have existed. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she had said it, that same flat certainty, like she was not giving me advice but stating a fact. Maybe it was the strangeness of the night, the rain and the darkness and the empty rest stop. Maybe it was just the cumulative weight of too many hours on the road, too many miles of empty highway, too much time alone with my own thoughts. Whatever the reason, I took Route 54 north. The junction came up about 15 minutes later, and I made the turn without saying anything. Opal did not react, did not nod or smile or acknowledge that I had taken her advice. She just sat there, still as a stone, watching the road. Route 54 was darker than the main highway with fewer lights and no traffic at all. The rain had let up a little, but the wind had picked up, buffeting the trailer and making me grip the wheel harder to keep the rig steady. I checked my mirrors and saw nothing but darkness behind me. I reached for my CB radio to check in with the dispatch. I was running behind schedule because of the weather, and I knew Tanner Greavy would be waiting for an update. Tanner was the night dispatcher for my company, a nervous, precise man who tracked every truck like it was a piece of himself out there on the highway. He did not like surprises. This is Harker inbound to Amarillo, I said into the handset. Running about 90 minutes behind due to weather. Took the Route 54 detour, should be there by 1 a.m. The radio crackled, and Tanner's voice came through, tight and worried as always. Copy that, Harker. What made you take 54? That route adds almost an hour to your trip. I glanced at Opal. She was still staring straight ahead, but I thought I saw something flicker across her face. A reaction, an awareness that I was talking about her. Just had a feeling, I said into the radio. Weather seemed better this way. There was a pause. Then Tanner said, All right, but check in again when you reach the Dalhart Junction. I want to know you are on track. Copy that. I hung up the handset and looked at Opal again. She had not moved, had not changed expression. But there was something different about her now. A tension in her shoulders, a tightness around her eyes. How did you know? I asked. She turned her head slowly and looked at me. Know what? That I should take this road. How did you know the main highway would be worse? She held my gaze for a long moment. Then she turned back to the windshield. I know a lot of things about this highway, she said. I have been traveling it for a long time. How long? She did not answer. I let it go. I did not want to push her, did not want to hear an answer that might make me regret picking her up. So I drove in silence, watching the mile markers count down, listening to the wind outside and the hum of the engine and the soft sound of Opal breathing beside me. Around 11:30 p.m., we passed a sign for a fuel station. Murphy's Truck Stop, 5 miles. I knew the place. Had stopped there many times on this route. Good coffee, clean restrooms, fair prices. I need to fuel up, I said. You want anything? Coffee? Food? Opal shook her head. I will wait in the truck. I pulled into Murphy's and parked at the fuel island. The rain had stopped completely now, and the sky was starting to clear, showing patches of stars through the breaking clouds. I got out and started fueling, watching the numbers climb on the pump. Through the window of my cab, I could see Opal sitting motionless in the passenger seat. She was not looking at me. Was not looking at anything, as far as I could tell. Just sitting there with her hands in her lap and her eyes fixed on something I could not see. I went inside to pay and grab a coffee. The clerk was a young guy I did not recognize, probably new since my last run through here. He rang me up without much conversation, and I was back at my truck in 5 minutes. Opal was exactly where I had left her. Same position, same expression, same stillness. I climbed into the cab and handed her a coffee I had bought for her anyway. She looked at it for a moment, then took it and set it in the cup holder without drinking. "Thank you," she said, "but I do not need it." I shrugged and started the engine. "Suit yourself." We pulled back onto Route 54 and continued north. The sky was clearing fast now, and I could see stars emerging from behind the clouds, bright and cold and distant. The wind had died down, and the road was smooth and straight, stretching out ahead of us like a line drawn across the darkness. I was starting to feel better about the night. The weather was improving. I was making decent time despite the detour. And Opal, strange as she was, seemed harmless enough, just a quiet woman who needed a ride and happened to know the roads. Then she said something that changed everything. "There is a rest stop about 40 miles ahead," she said. "Murphy's Crossing. A driver disappeared there 3 weeks ago." I looked at her. "What?" "His name was Earl Comstock," she said. "He was hauling grain to Kansas City. He stopped at Murphy's Crossing to sleep, and in the morning, his truck was there, but he was gone." I felt that chill again. "How do you know that?" Opal turned and looked at me with those dark, still eyes. "Because I was there," she said. I did not know what to say to that. Did not know what she meant. Did not know if she was telling me she had witnessed something or been part of something or was warning me about something. But before I could ask, she spoke again. "And there's another one," she said, 60 miles past that. "A woman named Delafontaine. She disappeared at the Crossroads fuel station in September. They found her rig with the engine still running and the driver's door open. She was never seen again." Opal turned back to the windshield. "I know every place on this highway where someone has disappeared," she said. "I know the dates and the names and the circumstances. I know which rest stops are safe and which ones are not. I know which routes to take and which ones to avoid." She paused. "That is why you picked me up tonight, Virgil. Because I can help you get where you are going, as long as you listen to me." I drove in silence for a long time after that. Did not ask any more questions. Did not challenge what she was telling me. Just drove, watching the road, thinking about Earl Comstock and Delafontaine and all the other names she might know. Thinking about what it meant that she knew them. Thinking about what it meant that I had picked her up. Around midnight, my CB radio crackled to life. It was Tanner, checking in like he had asked me to. "Harker, you at Dalhart yet?" I grabbed the handset. "About 20 minutes out. Good, stay on schedule." "And Harker," he paused. "Yeah? Be careful out there. I have been hearing some strange chatter on the frequencies tonight. Drivers talking about things on the highway. Things that are not supposed to be there." I looked at Opal. She was watching me now, her eyes fixed on my face. What kind of things? I asked Tanner. Another pause, longer this time. People, Tanner said finally. People standing by the road. People who are not there when you look back. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck. Copy that, I said. I will keep my eyes open. I hung up the handset and kept driving. Opal did not say anything, did not react to what Tanner had said, just sat there in the passenger seat, still as a stone, watching me with those dark, knowing eyes. The highway stretched out ahead of us, empty and dark and full of secrets, and I was starting to realize that the woman beside me knew every single one of them. We passed the Dalhart Junction at 12:23 a.m. I radioed Tanner to let him know, and he acknowledged with his usual clipped efficiency. On schedule, he said. Keep it that way. Then he was gone, and I was alone again with the highway and the darkness, and the woman sitting beside me who knew things she should not know. Opal had not spoken since telling me about Earl Comstock and Delafontaine. She just sat there, still as a photograph, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I wanted to ask her more questions, wanted to understand how she knew about the disappearances, why she was on that highway, what she meant when she said she had been traveling it for a long time. But something stopped me. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the sense that some questions have answers you do not want to hear. Or maybe it was just the strangeness of the night, the way everything felt slightly off-kilter, like a picture hanging crooked on a wall. Whatever the reason, I kept my mouth shut and my eyes on the road. The highway stretched out ahead of us, straight and empty and dark. The clouds had cleared completely now, and the stars were bright overhead, scattered across the sky like salt on a black cloth. The only sounds were the hum of the engine and the whisper of the tires on the asphalt, and the soft hiss of the heater blowing warm air into the cab. Then Opal spoke. Murphy's Crossing is in 12 miles. I looked at her. The rest stop where Earl Comstock disappeared? She nodded. I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. Are we stopping there? No. She turned her head and looked at me with those dark, still eyes. We are not stopping anywhere until we reach Amarillo. I did not argue with her. We passed Murphy's Crossing without slowing down. I caught a glimpse of it through my window as we went by. A small building, a few parking spots, a single light pole casting a weak yellow glow over the empty lot. It looked exactly like the rest stop where I had found Opal. Same layout, same feeling of abandonment, same sense that something was wrong. In my mirror, I saw the rest stop recede into the darkness behind us, and just before it disappeared from view, I thought I saw something. A figure standing at the edge of the parking lot. A man, maybe, or the shape of a man, standing there motionless, watching us pass. Then it was gone, and there was nothing behind us but the empty highway. I looked at Opal. She was staring straight ahead, but there was something different about her expression. A tightness around her mouth, a tension in her jaw, like she knew what I had seen, like she had been expecting it. Who was that? I asked. She did not answer. Opal, who was that man at the rest stop? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "That was Earl." I felt my blood turn to ice. Earl Comstock, the driver who disappeared? She nodded. But you said he vanished 3 weeks ago. You said they never found him. They did not, she said, but that does not mean he is gone. I did not know what to say to that. Did not know what she meant. Did not know if I wanted to know. We drove in silence for another 20 miles. The highway was completely empty now. No other trucks, no cars, no lights except the stars and the glow of my own headlights on the asphalt. It was the kind of emptiness that makes you feel like you are the last person on Earth. The kind that makes you start to doubt that there is anything out there at all. Around 1 a.m., Opal spoke again. "There's a fuel station coming up, Crossroads. That is where Delafontaine disappeared." I remembered the name from earlier, the woman whose rig was found with the engine running and the door open. "Are we passing that one too?" I asked. "Yes," Opal said. "Do not slow down, do not look." But I did look, I could not help it. As we passed the Crossroads fuel station, I turned my head and looked out my window at the empty parking lot. The dark building, the pumps standing silent and still under the flickering lights. And I saw her, a woman standing beside one of the pumps. Dark hair, dark clothes, arms hanging at her sides. Standing there motionless, her face turned toward the highway, toward me, watching us pass with eyes I could not see but could feel. Delafontaine. I looked away, looked back at the road, gripped the wheel and pressed the accelerator and drove as fast as I could away from that place. In the passenger seat, Opal sat perfectly still. She did not look at me, did not acknowledge what I had seen. Just sat there with her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead at the empty highway. "They are all still there," she said quietly. "Everyone who disappears on this highway. They do not leave. They just stay, waiting at the places where they were taken." "Waiting for what?" She did not answer. At 1:30 a.m., my CB radio started acting strange. It began with static, a soft hiss that grew louder and louder until it filled the cab like white noise. I reached for the dial to turn it down, but before I could touch it, a voice came through the speaker. Not Tanner, not another driver. A voice I did not recognize. A woman's voice, low and flat and distant, like someone speaking from very far away. "Route 287 North," the voice said. "Exit 14. Third Tuesday of November. That is when they take people from the Plainview rest area." I stared at the radio. "What the hell?" The voice continued, reciting information in that same flat, distant tone. "Interstate 40 West. Mile marker 112. First Friday of every month. The fuel station with the red sign. Do not stop there after midnight. Highway 87 South. The way station near Happy, last week of October. They took a driver named Mitchell Corley there in 2019. They took another one named Sandra Bright in 2021. The voice kept going. Rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers. Days and dates and names. A catalog of disappearances delivered in that same emotionless monotone, like someone reading from a list. I looked at Opal. She was staring at the radio with an expression I had not seen before. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide. Her hands, still folded in her lap, were trembling. "That is me," she said. I did not understand. "What?" The voice on the radio. She swallowed. "That is my voice." I listened. The voice was still speaking, still reciting names and dates and locations. And now that Opal had said it, I could hear the similarity. The same low tone, the same flat delivery, the same strange, distant quality, like someone speaking from the bottom of a well. But Opal was sitting right next to me. Her mouth was closed. She was not speaking. "How is that possible?" I asked. She shook her head. "I do not know. It has never happened before." The voice on the radio stopped mid-sentence. There was a moment of silence. Then static again, loud and harsh, filling the cab with noise. And then, underneath the static, something else. A different voice. Deeper. Rougher. A man's voice. "Virgil Harker," the voice said. I grabbed the handset. "Who is this?" The voice did not answer my question. Instead, it said, "She should not be in your truck, Virgil. She does not belong there. She does not belong anywhere." I looked at Opal. She was staring at the radio, her face white. her hands gripping the edge of the seat. "Who is that?" I asked her. "Who is talking?" She shook her head. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I do not know. I have never heard that voice before." The man's voice came through the radio again. "She has been on this highway too long, Virgil. She knows too much. The places, the names, the dates. She knows things that no one is supposed to know. And now she is spreading that knowledge to you." A pause. "That is dangerous, Virgil. That is very dangerous." I pressed the transmit button on the handset. "What do you want?" "What are you trying to tell me?" Static. Then the man's voice again. Closer now. Clearer. Like he was right there in the cab with us. "Let her out, Virgil. The next rest stop you pass, pull over and let her out. Leave her there and keep driving. Do not look back. Do not think about her again. That is the only way you get to Amarillo alive." The radio went dead. I sat there in the silence, my hand still gripping the handset, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked at Opal. She was still staring at the radio, her face pale, her breathing shallow. "What was that?" I asked. "Who was that man?" She shook her head slowly. "I do not know," she said. "But he is wrong." "Wrong about what?" She turned and looked at me, and there was something in her eyes that I had not seen before. Fear. Real fear. Not the controlled stillness she had shown all night. "He is wrong that letting me out will save you," she said. "If you leave me at a rest stop, you will never reach Amarillo. You will disappear, just like all the others. Just like Earl and Della and all the names I know." "How do you know that?" She held my gaze. "Because that is what happened to me." She told me her story. It came out in pieces, fragments, like she was remembering something that had happened a long time ago and had to search for the details. But I listened, and I did not interrupt, and slowly the pieces came together into something that made a terrible kind of sense. Opal Strand had been a trucker. 23 years ago. She had driven the same routes I drove, hauled the same kinds of loads, stopped at the same rest areas and fuel stations. She had been good at her job, reliable, careful. The kind of driver who knew every mile of her routes and never took unnecessary risks. Then one night she picked up a hitchhiker. It was at a rest stop that should not have been there. A place that did not appear on any map, that she had never seen before despite driving that route for years. A man was standing there in the rain, waiting for a ride. She stopped because she felt sorry for him. Because she thought she was helping someone in need. The man got in her truck and told her things. Told her about places on the highway where drivers disappeared. Told her the names and dates and locations. Told her secrets that no living person should know. And then, somewhere between the rest stop and her destination, she disappeared. "I was found," she said. "My truck was found, I mean. Parked at a fuel station off Highway 54. Engine running, door open. No sign of me anywhere." She looked down at her hands. "I do not remember what happened," she said. "I do not remember getting out of the truck. I do not remember where I went. I just remember being on the highway, walking for a long time, and then standing at that rest stop where you found me, waiting for someone to pick me up." She raised her eyes to meet mine. "That was 23 years ago, Virgil. I have been on this highway ever since, moving from rest stop to rest stop, getting picked up by drivers, telling them what I know, trying to help them get where they are going." I did not know what to say, did not know if I believed her, did not know if it mattered. "What happened to the drivers you rode with?" I asked. "Did they make it to their destinations?" Opal was quiet for a long moment. "Some of them," she said finally. "The ones who listened to me. The ones who did not stop where I told them not to stop. And the others?" She did not answer. She did not have to. I drove in silence after that, thinking about what she had told me, thinking about the voice on the radio, the man who had told me to let her out, thinking about Earl Comstock and Della Fontaine and all the other names she knew, thinking about whether I was going to be one of those names. At 2 a.m., I radioed Tanner to check in. He answered immediately, his voice tight with that familiar nervous energy. "Harker, where are you? You should have been in Amarillo 30 minutes ago." I looked at the clock on my dashboard. It read 2:07 a.m., but that was impossible. I had been on schedule at the Dalhart Junction. I had not stopped anywhere. I had been driving at normal speed the entire time. Somehow, I had lost almost an hour. "I'm running behind," I told Tanner. "Weather delays. Should be there by 3. There was a pause. Then Tanner said, "Harker, it has not rained in the Panhandle in 3 days." I felt my stomach drop. "What? The weather has been clear all week," Tanner said. "No rain, no storms, nothing. What are you talking about?" I looked at Opal. She was watching me with those dark, still eyes. "I must have been mistaken," I said into the radio. "Forget it. I will be there by 3. I hung up the handset before Tanner could ask any more questions. The highway stretched out ahead of me, dark and empty and endless. The stars burned overhead. The engine hummed. And beside me, Opal Strand sat in silence, knowing things she should not know, waiting to see if I would become another name on her list. Amarillo was still 50 miles away. It felt like 1,000. The highway was wrong. I had driven this route 200 times. I knew every mile marker, every curve, every place where the road dipped or rose or bent to the east. I knew where the billboards were and where the exit signs were, and where the landscape changed from flat scrubland to rolling hills. I knew this highway the way I knew my own name. But tonight it was wrong. The mile markers were not in the right order. I passed marker 47, then marker 52, then marker 49. The exits I expected did not appear when they should. The fuel stations and rest stops that I knew by heart were missing, replaced by others I had never seen. It was like driving through a place that looked like the highway but was not quite. A copy made by someone who did not know the original well enough to get the details right. I looked at Opal. She was staring out the windshield, her face blank, her hands folded in her lap. "What is happening?" I asked. "The road is not right. The markers are out of order." She nodded slowly. "It happens sometimes, when you have been on the highway too long. The road starts to shift." "Shift how?" She turned and looked at me. "The highway is not just a road, Virgil. It is a system, a network. And like any system, it has rules, ways of keeping itself in order, ways of dealing with things that do not belong." She looked back at the windshield. "I do not belong here anymore," she said. "And the longer I stay in your truck, the more the highway tries to correct that. It moves things around, changes the order, tries to confuse you so you will stop somewhere you should not stop." I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. "So what do I do?" "Keep driving," she said. "Do not stop. Do not get out of the truck. No matter what you see, no matter what the road does, you keep driving until you reach Amarillo. And if I cannot find Amarillo, if the highway keeps shifting," she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You will find it, as long as I am here to guide you." I did not know if that was reassuring or terrifying. We drove on. At 2:30 a.m., the radio started again. It began the same way as before. Static, loud, and harsh, filling the cab with noise. Then Opal's voice, that distant, flat monotone, reciting names and dates and locations. Rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers. Places where drivers had disappeared. A catalog of loss, delivered without emotion, without pause, without end. But this time, there was something different. The names were not strangers anymore. Highway 287 South, Exit 23, November 14th, 2019. Virgil Harker stopped for fuel at the Conoco station. He was seen on the security camera entering the building. He was never seen leaving. I felt my blood turn to ice. That was my name, my route, a date that was only a week away. Interstate 27 North, mile marker 88, November 14th, 2019. Virgil Harker's truck was found parked on the shoulder. Engine running. Driver's door open. No sign of the driver. I grabbed the radio and switched it off. The cab went silent. Opal was staring at me. Her face was pale. "That was you," she said. "That was your name. I know. November 14th. That is 6 days from now." I swallowed hard. "Is that real? Is that going to happen?" She shook her head slowly. "I do not know. I have never heard the radio say someone's name before it happened. I have only ever heard it after." I sat there, gripping the wheel, staring at the dark highway ahead of me. 6 days. In 6 days, according to that voice, I was going to disappear. My truck was going to be found on the shoulder of Interstate 27, engine running, door open, no sign of me anywhere. Just like Earl Comstock. Just like Delafontaine. Just like all the names Opal knew. "Can I stop it?" I asked. "Can I change it?" Opal was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I do not know, Virgil. I have never met anyone who knew their date before it came." She looked at me. "But you know now, and that has to mean something." I did not know what it meant. Did not know if knowing made a difference, or if I was just another name on a list, waiting for my turn to disappear. But I did know one thing. I was not going to stop driving until I reached Amarillo. The next hour was the longest of my life. The highway kept shifting. Mile markers appeared and disappeared in random order. Exits led to places that did not exist. Rest stops materialized out of the darkness and then vanished when I looked back in my mirror. It was like driving through a fever dream, a landscape that obeyed its own logic and changed every time I tried to understand it. But I kept driving. Opal guided me. She told me when to change lanes, when to slow down, when to ignore an exit that looked legitimate but was not. She knew the highway in a way I never could. Knew its tricks and traps and hidden dangers. She had been traveling it for 23 years, and in that time, she had learned its secrets. Some of them, anyway. At 3:15 a.m., I saw lights ahead. Real lights, steady and bright, not the flickering illusions that had been appearing and disappearing all night. A city on the horizon. Buildings and streetlights and the glow of civilization. Amarillo. I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief. Hope. The sense that maybe, despite everything, I was going to make it. Then the engine died. No warning. No sputtering or coughing or gradual loss of power. One moment the engine was running, and the next moment it was not. The truck slowed, the power steering went heavy, and I had to fight the wheel to guide the rig onto the shoulder before it rolled to a stop. I sat there in the sudden silence, my hand still gripping the wheel, my heart pounding. I tried the ignition. Nothing. Tried it again. Nothing. The engine was dead, and no amount of turning the key was going to bring it back. I looked at Opal. She was staring straight ahead at the lights of Amarillo on the horizon. So close. Maybe 5 miles away. Maybe less. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head. "The highway does not want you to reach the city. It is trying to stop you. By killing my engine, by making you get out of the truck." I understood then. The engine had not failed on its own. Something had stopped it. And now I was sitting on the shoulder of a dark highway with a dead truck and a city I could see but could not reach. If I got out to check the engine, I would disappear, just like all the others. "What do I do?" I asked. Opal turned and looked at me. There was something in her eyes I had not seen before. sadness, resignation. The look of someone who has seen this happen too many times to hope for a different outcome. "You stay in the truck," she said. "No matter what, you do not open that door." "For how long until morning?" She did not answer. "Opal, how long do I have to stay in the truck?" She looked away. "I do not know. I have never been with someone when this happened. I have only ever seen the trucks afterward, empty, abandoned. The driver's gone. I sat there in the darkness, looking at the lights of Amarillo glowing on the horizon, so close I could almost touch them. 5 miles. In a car, that would be 5 minutes. On foot, maybe an hour. But I could not drive, and I could not walk, and all I could do was sit in my dead truck and wait for something to happen. Then I remembered the radio. I reached for the CB and turned it on. Static filled the cab, loud and harsh. But underneath it, I could hear something else. A voice faint and distant like someone calling from very far away. "Tanner," I said into the handset. "Tanner, can you hear me?" The static shifted. The voice grew slightly clearer. "Harker?" "Breaking up. Your location. I'm on the shoulder about 5 miles from Amarillo. My engine died. I need help." More static. Then Tanner's voice again, clearer this time. "Harker, you should have been here 2 hours ago. I have been trying to reach you. Where have you been?" I did not know how to answer that. Did not know how to explain that the highway had been shifting, that time had been moving wrong, that I had been driving through a landscape that did not exist. "I need a tow," I said. "Can you send someone to get me?" A pause, then Tanner's voice tight with worry. "Harker, there is something wrong with your signal. Your GPS is showing you in 3 different locations at once. Every time I try to lock onto you, you move." I looked at Opal. She was watching me, her face pale. "I am not moving," I said into the radio. "I am parked on the shoulder. I have not moved in 5 minutes." "According to my system, you have been moving all night," Tanner said. "Your route makes no sense, Harker. You have been going in circles. Backtracking. Jumping from one highway to another. I have never seen anything like it." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Just send a tow truck," I said. "Send it to the shoulder of Highway 287, 5 miles south of Amarillo. I will be here." A long pause. Then Tanner said, "I will try. But Harker, be careful. Something is not right about tonight. I have been getting reports from other drivers all night. Strange things on the highway. People seeing things that are not there." "I know," I said. "I have seen them too." I hung up the handset and sat back in my seat. Outside the windshield, the lights of Amarillo glowed on the horizon. Inside the cab, Opal sat motionless, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on something I could not see. "How long until the tow truck gets here?" she asked. "I do not know. Maybe 30 minutes, maybe an hour." She nodded slowly. "That might be enough time. Enough time for what?" She turned and looked at me. Her eyes were dark and sad, and there was something in them that made my chest tighten. "Enough time for me to tell you what you need to know," she said. "About November 14th, about how to stop it from happening." I stared at her. "You know how to stop it?" She nodded. "But there is a cost, Virgil. There is always a cost." "What kind of cost?" She was quiet for a long moment, looking at me with those dark, sad eyes. Then she reached out and put her hand on my arm. Her touch was cold. So cold it burned. "Someone has to take your place," she said. I did not understand at first. "What do you mean, take my place?" Opal pulled her hand back and folded it in her lap with the other one. "The highway needs a certain number of people," she said. "That is how it works. That is why there are always disappearances. It is not random, it is not accidents, it is the highway taking what it needs. She looked at me. Your name came up because someone else's name was supposed to be on the list, she said. Someone who avoided their date. Someone who cheated the system. And now the highway needs to balance the books. It needs to take someone to replace the one who got away. Who? I asked. Who got away? She did not answer. But I saw something in her eyes. A flicker of guilt. A shadow of shame. And I understood. It was you, I said. You were supposed to disappear 23 years ago. You were supposed to be taken. But something happened. You avoided it somehow, and now the highway has been trying to balance the books ever since, Opal said, taking other drivers in my place, one after another, all these years. She looked down at her hands. I know their names because they were taken instead of me, she said. Every single one of them. Earl Comstock. Della Fontaine. All of them. They disappeared because I did not. I sat there in silence, processing what she had told me. 23 years of disappearances. Dozens of drivers, maybe hundreds, taken by the highway because one woman had escaped her fate. And now it was my turn. Why me? I asked. Why is my name on the list? Because you picked me up, Opal said. Because I got in your truck. The highway knows I am here. It knows I am trying to escape again. And it is going to take you instead. She raised her eyes to meet mine. Unless I let it take me first. I told her no. I told her I would not let her sacrifice herself for me. I told her there had to be another way. I told her that 23 years of guilt was enough. That she did not owe the highway anything else. That she had already paid for whatever sin she had committed by escaping her fate. She listened to all of it. And when I was finished, she shook her head. It does not work that way, Virgil. The highway does not forgive. It does not forget. It just takes what it is owed, one way or another. If I do not give myself to it tonight, it will take you on November 14th. And then it will take someone else after you, and someone else after that. On and on, forever, until I finally stop running. She looked at me with those dark, sad eyes. I'm tired of running, she said. I'm tired of watching other people disappear because of me. I am tired of knowing all those names. I did not know what to say. Did not know how to argue with someone who had spent 23 years carrying a weight I could not imagine. Did not know how to convince her that her life was worth more than mine, when she had already decided that it was not. So I asked her a question instead. What happened 23 years ago? What happened that made you escape? Opal was quiet for a long moment. Outside the windshield, the lights of Amarillo glowed on the horizon. Inside the cab, the silence pressed down on us like a physical thing. Then she told me. She had been driving a load of furniture from Dallas to Denver. A routine run on a route she knew well. The weather was clear, the traffic was light, and she was making good time. She expected to reach Denver by morning. Around midnight, she stopped at a rest area to use the bathroom and stretch her legs. It was a small place, just a building and a few parking spots and a single light pole. There were no other vehicles, no other drivers, just her and the darkness and the highway stretching out in both directions. When she came out of the bathroom, there was a man standing beside her truck. He was tall and thin, wearing dark clothes that blended into the night. His face was in shadow, and she could not see his features. He was just standing there, motionless, his arms at his sides looking at her. She asked him if he needed help. He did not answer. She asked him if he was stranded. He did not answer. She asked him to move away from her truck. He did not answer. She started walking toward her rig, planning to get in and drive away as fast as she could. But as she got closer, the man raised his arm and pointed at her. Not at her, at something behind her. She turned and looked. There was nothing there. Just the building and the parking lot and the empty highway. When she turned back, the man was gone. She got in her truck and drove away. Drove as fast as she could, not stopping, not slowing down, not looking back. She drove all the way to Denver and delivered her load and told herself that the man at the rest stop had been a hallucination, a product of exhaustion, a trick of the light. But she knew it was not true. And 3 days later, when she was driving back to Dallas on the same route, she saw him again. He was standing at a different rest stop this time. Same posture, same dark clothes, same shadowed face, same arm raised, pointing at something behind her. And when she turned to look, he was gone. She saw him again a week after that, and again 2 weeks after that, and again, at rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers all along her route. Always the same, always pointing, always disappearing when she turned around. She started to understand what was happening, started to realize that the man was not just appearing to her randomly. He was marking her, counting down to something, waiting for her to stop at the wrong place at the wrong time. So she stopped stopping. She started driving straight through on her runs, not pulling over for anything. She brought food and water and a portable toilet so she would never have to leave her truck. She drove 16, 18, 20 hours at a stretch, fighting off exhaustion, refusing to give the highway a chance to take her. And it worked. For a while. But you cannot drive forever. You cannot stay awake forever. Eventually, your body gives out, and you have to stop. She made it 3 weeks before she could not go any longer. Her eyes were burning. Her hands were shaking. She was hallucinating shapes on the road that were not there. She knew that if she did not stop and sleep, she was going to crash and kill herself and probably someone else. So she stopped. She pulled into a rest area outside of Lubbock and parked in a spot near the building where there were lights and other trucks. She locked her doors and climbed into the sleeper berth and closed her eyes. When she woke up, she was not in her truck anymore. She was standing on the shoulder of the highway. It was night, but not the same night. The air was different. The stars were different. The landscape was different. She was somewhere else, when else, and she did not know how she had gotten there. She started walking. She walked for what felt like hours, maybe days. She walked past rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers, and at every one, she saw them. The drivers who had disappeared, standing there motionless, their faces blank, waiting for something that never came. She understood then what had happened. The highway had taken her. She was supposed to be one of them now, one of the lost, standing at a rest stop forever, waiting. But something had gone wrong. She did not know what, did not know why. But instead of being trapped at one location, she was moving, drifting, passing through the highway like a ghost, invisible to the drivers who passed her, unable to stop, unable to rest. Until one night a truck pulled over. A driver got out and looked at her and spoke to her. Asked her if she needed help. Asked her if she wanted a ride. And she realized she was visible again. She was real again. She could get in a truck and travel the highway and interact with the world. But she was not alive. Not really. She was something else now. Something between. A ghost who could walk and talk and ride in trucks, but who was not part of the world anymore. Who was only part of the highway. And the highway was angry. It had been cheated. It had marked her for taking, and she had slipped away somehow, and now it wanted her back. But it could not take her directly. It could only take the drivers she rode with, the ones who picked her up and gave her a place in their trucks and their lives. One by one, they disappeared. And, one by one, she learned their names. She finished her story and sat there in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the lights of Amarillo. I did not know what to say. I wanted to tell her it was not her fault, that she had not asked to be taken, that she had not asked to be turned into whatever she was now. that the highway's hunger was not her responsibility. But I knew it would not help. She had been carrying this guilt for 23 years. Nothing I said was going to take it away. So instead, I asked her another question. How do you do it? How do you give yourself to the highway? She looked at me. I get out of the truck, she said. I walk to the shoulder. And I wait. That is it. That is it. The highway will do the rest. I looked at the door of my cab, at the handle that I had not touched since the engine died, at the darkness beyond the window pressing in on all sides. If you get out, I said, what happens to me? Opal was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the engine will start again. You will drive to Amarillo. You will deliver your load. And on November 14th, you will not disappear. She paused. But you will have to live with knowing what I did for you. I shook my head. I cannot let you do that. You do not have a choice, Virgil. She reached for the door handle. This is not your decision to make. Wait. She stopped. I looked at her, at this woman I had picked up 3 hours ago at a rest stop that should not have existed. This woman who knew every place on the highway where someone had disappeared. This woman who had been running from her fate for 23 years and had finally decided to stop. If you go out there, I said, what happens to you? Do you become like the others? Standing at a rest stop forever, waiting. She shook her head slowly. I do not know, she said. Maybe, or maybe something else. Maybe nothing. She looked at me. But whatever happens, it will be over. And that is enough. She opened the door. The cold rushed in immediately, biting and sharp, carrying the smell of dust and sage and something else. Something that smelled like ozone, like electricity, like the air before a lightning strike. Opal, I said. She looked back at me. Her face was calm, peaceful almost. The face of someone who had made a decision and was at rest with it. Thank you, Virgil, she said, for picking me up, for listening to my story, for not leaving me at the side of the road when that voice told you to. She smiled, and for a moment I could see who she had been 23 years ago. A trucker, a regular person. Someone who drove the highways and hauled loads, and lived her life without knowing that the road she traveled on was hungry. Drive safe, she said. Then she stepped out of the cab and closed the door behind her. I watched her walk away. She moved slowly, deliberately, her footsteps crunching on the gravel shoulder. She did not look back, did not hesitate, just walked toward the darkness at the edge of the highway, her figure growing smaller and smaller in my mirror. I wanted to call out to her, wanted to open my door and run after her and drag her back to the truck. Wanted to do something, anything, to stop what was about to happen. But I did not. I sat there in my cab and watched her walk away, and I did nothing. She reached the edge of the shoulder, stopped, stood there for a moment, her arms at her sides, her face turned toward the darkness. And then she was gone, not walked away, not faded into the distance. Gone. One moment she was standing there, and the next moment she was not. Like someone had switched off a light, like she had never existed at all. I stared at the empty shoulder, at the place where she had been standing, at the darkness that had swallowed her. Then the engine turned over. I had not touched the key, had not done anything. But the engine was running, rumbling beneath me, filling the cab with warmth and noise and the promise of movement. I put the truck in gear, pulled back onto the highway, drove toward the lights of Amarillo on the horizon. I did not look back. I delivered my load at 4:17 a.m. The warehouse was quiet, just a night supervisor and a couple of guys running forklifts. They unloaded my trailer without asking questions, and I signed the paperwork and drove to a truck stop to get some coffee and try to make sense of what had happened. I sat in a booth by the window, watching the sun come up over the Texas Panhandle, thinking about Opal Strand, about her story, about the 23 years she had spent on the highway, carrying her guilt, learning the names of the drivers who had disappeared because of her, about the choice she had made. I thought about November 14th, about the voice on the radio that had said my name, about the fate I had been marked for and the woman who had taken my place. I did not know if I believed any of it. Did not know if Opal had been telling the truth, or if she had been crazy, or if the whole night had been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion and bad coffee. But I knew one thing. I was alive. I was in Amarillo, and something had happened on that highway that I would never be able to explain. I finished my coffee and walked back to my truck. The sun was up now, bright and warm, burning off the chill of the night. I climbed into the cab and sat there for a moment, looking at the passenger seat where Opal had been sitting. It was empty, but there was something on the seat, a piece of paper, folded in half, with my name written on the front in handwriting I did not recognize. I unfolded it. Inside was a list, names and dates and locations, rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers, places on the highway where drivers had disappeared. At the bottom of the list, in that same handwriting, was a note. These are the places to avoid. The dates when they take people. I am giving you this so you can stay safe. So you can help others stay safe. So, my 23 years will mean something. Do not let them take anyone else. Opal. I sat there for a long time, holding that piece of paper, looking at the names. Dozens of them, maybe 100. 23 years of disappearances, written out in neat, careful handwriting. A map of loss, a guide to survival, a gift from a woman who had finally stopped running. That was 6 months ago. I still drive the highways, still haul loads from El Paso to Amarillo and back, still pass the rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers where Opal told me people had disappeared. But I am careful now. I check her list before every run. I avoid the places she marked on the dates she specified. I tell other drivers to be careful, though I do not tell them why. I do not think they would believe me if I did. November 14th came and went. I stayed off the highway that day. Stayed home with the doors locked and the blinds drawn and the radio off. Waited for something to happen. Nothing did. Maybe Opal's sacrifice worked. Maybe the highway got what it wanted and crossed my name off its list. Maybe I am safe now. Or maybe I am just waiting. Maybe the highway is patient. Maybe it will come for me eventually, the way it came for all those other drivers, and Opal's gift only bought me time. I do not know, but I know one thing. Sometimes, late at night, when I am driving alone on a dark highway, I hear something on my CB radio. A voice, faint and distant, like someone speaking from very far away. A woman's voice. It recites names and dates and locations. Rest stops and fuel stations and mile markers. Places where drivers have disappeared. A catalog of loss, delivered in a flat, emotionless monotone, like someone reading from a list. And sometimes, at the end of the list, I hear my name, not as someone who is going to disappear, as someone who picked her up, someone who listened to her story, someone who let her go when she needed to go. Virgil Harker, the voice says. Pine Ridge Rest Area, November 8th. A pause, thank you, then static, then silence, and I keep driving. The first time I heard it, I thought something was wrong with my engine. My name is Kason Moreau, and I have been hauling freight across Louisiana and Texas for 14 years. In that time, I have learned to listen to my truck the way a doctor listens to a heartbeat. Every sound means something. Every rattle and hum and knock tells you something about what is happening under the hood. You learn to recognize the good sounds and the bad sounds, and you learn to pay attention when something changes. That September night, something changed. I was running a load of drilling equipment from Lake Charles to Houston, a route I had driven maybe 300 times over the years. The weather was warm and humid, typical for the Gulf Coast in late summer, and the highway was busy with the usual mix of trucks and cars and tankers heading to and from the refineries. Nothing unusual. Nothing out of place. Then I heard the knock. It was coming from my engine. A rhythmic tapping sound, metal on metal, steady and persistent. The kind of sound that makes a trucker's stomach drop because it usually means something expensive is about to break. I pulled off at the next exit and parked in the lot of a fuel station to check under the hood. The engine was still running, and I could hear the knock clearly now. Tap, tap, tap. Regular as a heartbeat, coming from somewhere deep in the engine block. I shut off the engine and waited for it to cool down. Then I popped the hood and started looking for the source of the sound. Checked the belts, checked the hoses, checked the oil level and the coolant and all the other things that can cause an engine to knock. Everything looked fine. I started the engine again. The knock was gone. I sat there for a moment, listening to the engine idle. Smooth and steady, no tapping, no rattling, nothing out of place. Whatever had been making that sound, it had stopped. I told myself it was nothing. A fluke. Maybe a piece of debris had gotten caught somewhere and worked itself loose. Maybe the heat had caused something to expand and then contract. There were a dozen possible explanations, and I chose to believe one of them rather than worry about something I could not find. I got back on the highway and continued toward Houston. 20 miles later, I heard the knock again. Same sound, same rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was not coming from my engine. It was coming from outside my truck. I looked in my mirrors and saw another rig behind me. A black truck, maybe 100 yards back, running without lights. No headlights. No running lights. No marker lights on the trailer. Just a dark shape on the dark highway, visible only because of the reflected glow from my own taillights. And the knock was coming from that truck. I could hear it through my open window, carried on the warm night air. That same rhythmic tapping, metal on metal, steady and persistent. The sound I had thought was coming from my own engine. I slowed down, expecting the black truck to pass me. It did not. It slowed down too, maintaining the same distance behind me. 100 yards, no closer, no farther. I sped up. The black truck sped up. I changed lanes. The black truck changed lanes. I was being followed. I grabbed my CB radio and tried to raise the driver of the black truck. "This is the Peterbilt ahead of you running eastbound on I-10. You got your lights off, driver. You need to turn them on before you get pulled over." Static. I tried again. "Black truck behind me. Do you copy? You're running dark. Turn on your lights." More static. Then something else, a sound that might have been a voice, or might have been just interference. Low and distorted, like someone speaking through a broken speaker. I could not make out any words. I turned off the radio and kept driving, watching the black truck in my mirror. It stayed behind me, maintaining that same distance, running without lights, its engine knocking in that steady, rhythmic pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Like a heartbeat. Like a clock. Like something counting down. I did not know what to make of it. Did not know why the truck was following me, or why it was running dark, or why I could hear its engine knock from 100 yards away. I just knew that something was wrong, and I wanted to get off the highway and away from that truck as soon as possible. The next exit was for Beaumont. I took it without signaling, cutting across 2 lanes of traffic, hoping to lose the black truck in the maneuver. It did not work. The black truck took the exit too, staying behind me, maintaining that same distance. I could still hear the knock, even over the sound of my own engine. Tap, tap, tap. steady and relentless. I drove into Beaumont and headed for a truck stop I knew on the east side of town. It was a big place, well lit, with plenty of other drivers around. I figured if the black truck followed me there, at least I would have witnesses. At least I would not be alone. I pulled into the truck stop and parked near the building, where the lights were brightest. Then I got out of my cab and looked back toward the entrance, waiting for the black truck to appear. It did not. I stood there for 5 minutes watching the entrance. Cars came and went. A couple of trucks pulled in, but the black truck was not among them. I walked to the edge of the parking lot and looked out at the street. No sign of the black truck. No sound of that knocking engine. Nothing but the normal traffic of a small Texas city on a warm September night. It was gone. I went inside the truck stop and got a cup of coffee. Sat in a booth by the window and tried to calm down. Tried to convince myself that I had imagined the whole thing, or at least exaggerated it in my mind. A truck running without lights was unusual but not unheard of. Maybe the driver had an electrical problem. Maybe he was trying to avoid getting pulled over for some reason. Maybe he had taken a different exit and I just had not noticed. But that did not explain the knock. That did not explain how I had heard it first from my own engine and then from a truck 100 yards behind me. That did not explain how the sound had followed me off the highway and into the city and then just stopped. I finished my coffee and walked back to my truck. Stood beside it for a moment, looking at the engine compartment, thinking about that sound. Then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. Not from my truck, from across the parking lot. I turned and looked. There was a truck parked in the far corner of the lot, away from the lights, in the shadows near the fence. A black truck, no lights, no signs of a driver. Just sitting there in the darkness, its engine running, that knocking sound coming from under the hood. I started walking toward it. I do not know why. Every instinct I had was telling me to get back in my truck and drive away, but something pulled me toward that black rig. Some need to understand what I was seeing, what I was hearing. Some need to know. I got about 50 feet away and stopped. The truck was old. Not vintage, just old. A model from the 1980s, maybe early 1990s. The paint was faded and dull, more gray than black in the dim light. The chrome was pitted with rust. The tires were worn down to almost nothing, and the engine was knocking, tap, tap, tap. That same sound, that same rhythm, coming from under the hood of this dead-looking truck that should not have been running at all. I took another step forward, then another. The engine stopped, the knocking stopped. The truck sat there in silence, dark and still, like it had never been running at all. I stood there for a long moment staring at the truck, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The truck just sat there. No sound, no movement, no sign of life. I turned and walked back to my own rig. Got in the cab. Started the engine. Drove out of that truck stop and back onto the highway without looking back. I made it to Houston by morning and delivered my load without any more incidents. Told myself the black truck had been a coincidence. Told myself the knocking sound had been some kind of acoustic trick. A sound bouncing off buildings or overpasses or something else that made it seem like it was coming from different places. Told myself there was a rational explanation for everything I had seen and heard. I almost believed it. 3 weeks later, I saw the truck again. I was in Shreveport this time, picking up a load of lumber for delivery to Baton Rouge. It was early evening, just after sunset, and I had stopped at a garage on the outskirts of town to get my brakes checked. They had been feeling soft on the last few runs, and I wanted to make sure everything was right before I got on the highway. The garage was a small place, just 2 bays and a waiting room with a coffee machine and some plastic chairs. The mechanic was a guy named Royce Callender, a big man in his 50s with grease-stained hands and a face that looked like it had seen a lot of hard years. He had been recommended to me by another driver, and his prices were fair, so I had started using him whenever I was in the Shreveport area. Royce put my truck up on the lift and started checking the brakes. I sat in the waiting room drinking bad coffee and looking out the window at the street. That was when I saw it. The black truck. It was parked across the street in the lot of an abandoned building. Same truck I had seen in Beaumont 3 weeks ago. Same faded paint. Same rusted chrome. Same worn tires. Sitting there in the shadows, no lights, no driver visible. And I could hear the knock. Even from across the street, even through the closed window of the waiting room, I could hear that sound. Tap, 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 rhythmic and steady, coming from the engine of that dead-looking truck. I got up and walked outside, stood in the parking lot of the garage, staring at the black truck across the street. The knock was louder out here, clearer. That same metal-on-metal tapping that I had heard on the highway, that I had heard in the truck stop, that I had thought was coming from my own engine. Royce came out of the garage, wiping his hands on a rag. He saw me staring and followed my gaze to the black truck across the street. "Something wrong?" he asked. "That truck," I said. "Do you see it?" Royce squinted. "The black one." "Yeah, I see it." "What about it?" "Do you hear that? The knocking?" Royce was quiet for a moment, listening. Then he nodded slowly. "Yeah, I hear it. Sounds like a rod knock. Bad one, too. That engine is not long for this world." He looked at me. "Why? You know that truck?" I shook my head. "No, but I have seen it before, a few weeks ago in Beaumont. It followed me off the highway." Royce raised his eyebrows. "Followed you?" I told him the story. The knock I had heard on the highway, the black truck running without lights. The way it had followed me to the truck stop and then disappeared. The way I had found it parked in the shadows with its engine running and then watched it go silent. Royce listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, looking at the black truck across the street. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "That truck has been parked there for 3 days," he said. "I see it every morning when I open up and every night when I close down. It is always in the same spot, and I have never seen anyone get in or out." He looked at me. "But the engine is always running, and it is always making that sound." I stared at him. "That is impossible. An engine cannot run for 3 days straight. It would run out of fuel." Royce shrugged. "I know what I have seen, and I know what I have heard. That truck has been sitting there with its engine knocking since Monday morning, and it is Thursday night now. You tell me how that is possible." I could not. I looked back at the black truck. It was still sitting there, still running, still knocking. Tap, tap, tap. Like a heartbeat, like a clock, like something waiting. "What do you think it is?" I asked Royce. He shook his head. "I do not know, but I will tell you one thing. I am not going over there to find out." He turned and walked back into the garage. I stood there for a while longer, watching the truck, listening to the knock. Then I went back inside and waited for Royce to finish with my brakes. When I pulled out of the garage an hour later, the black truck was still there. Still running, still knocking. I drove to Baton Rouge and did not look back, but I could not stop thinking about it. The black truck, the knock, the way it had appeared in 2 different cities 3 weeks apart, always in the shadows, always running, always making that same sound. I started asking other drivers about it, describing the truck, the sound, the way it seemed to follow me. Most of them looked at me like I was crazy. A few of them laughed. One guy told me I needed to get more sleep. But one driver, an old-timer named Guidry, who had been hauling freight since before I was born, got a strange look on his face when I told him the story. "Black truck," he said. "Knocking engine. No driver." "That is right," I said. You've seen it? Guidry shook his head slowly. No, but I have heard of it. Stories going back years. Drivers seeing a black truck on the highway hearing that knock, following them from city to city, showing up wherever they go. He looked at me. The stories say it is bad luck, he said. Real bad luck. They say the drivers who see that truck, things start going wrong for them. Accidents, breakdowns, health problems. He paused. They say some of them disappear. I felt a chill run down my spine. Disappear? Guidry nodded. Trucks found empty on the side of the road. Drivers gone without a trace. The stories say the black truck takes them. He leaned closer. If I were you, he said, I would find out what that truck wants before it decides to take you too. I did not know what to say to that. Did not know if I believed him. Did not know if any of it was real or just old trucker legends. The kind of stories that get passed around at truck stops and grow with each telling. But I knew one thing. The next time I saw that black truck, I was not going to run away. I was going to find out what it wanted. I saw the truck again 2 weeks later. This time it was in Lafayette, parked behind a warehouse on the south side of town. I was delivering a load of pipe fittings to a supply company, and when I came around the corner of the building to check my trailer seals, there it was. Same black paint, same rusted chrome, same worn tires, sitting in the shadows with its engine running, that knocking sound drifting across the empty lot. Tap, tap, tap. I stood there for a moment, staring at it. My heart was pounding, my hands were sweating. Every instinct I had was telling me to get back in my truck and drive away, the same way I had driven away in Beaumont and Shreveport. But I had made a promise to myself. The next time I saw that truck, I was going to find out what it wanted. I started walking toward it. The knock got louder as I approached. Clearer. That same metal-on-metal tapping, rhythmic and steady, like a heartbeat or a clock or something counting down to 0. The sound filled my head, blocking out everything else. The traffic on the street, the hum of the warehouse generators, my own footsteps on the cracked asphalt. I got within 20 feet of the truck and stopped. Up close, it looked even worse than I remembered. The paint was not just faded, it was flaking off in patches, revealing bare metal underneath that was spotted with rust. The windows were tinted so dark I could not see inside. The tires were bald, the rubber cracked and split in places. This truck should not have been on the road. Should not have been running at all. But it was running. The engine was turning over, slow and labored, like something that was barely alive but refusing to die. And that knock was coming from somewhere deep inside, a sound that did not belong to any mechanical problem I knew. I walked around to the back of the truck to look at the license plate. It was covered in something. A thick, black substance that looked like oil or grease smeared across the plate so completely that I could not read any of the numbers or letters. Could not even tell what state it was from. I reached out to wipe some of it away. The moment my fingers touched the plate, the engine stopped. The knock stopped. The truck went silent. I stood there with my hand on the plate, frozen, waiting for something to happen. The black substance was slick under my fingers, warm, almost hot, like it had been heated from inside. It smelled like petroleum and something else, something organic, something that made my stomach turn. I pulled my hand back and looked at my fingers. They were coated in the black stuff, thick and sticky, and when I tried to wipe them on my jeans, it would not come off. It just smeared, spreading across my palm, staining my skin. I looked back at the plate. I had cleared a small section, maybe 2 inches, and I could see part of a letter underneath. An M, maybe, or an N. But the rest was still covered, still hidden beneath that thick black layer. I reached out to wipe more of it away. The engine started. I jumped back, my heart hammering in my chest. The engine was running again, that slow, labored turnover, and the knock had started again too. Tap, tap, tap. Louder now. Faster. Like something had woken up. I backed away from the truck. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The knock slowed down, returned to its original rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. Steady and patient. I turned and walked back to my own truck. Got in the cab, started the engine. Drove out of that lot without looking back, but I could not stop thinking about what I had felt when I touched that plate. The warmth, the slickness, the way it had clung to my skin like it was alive. And I could not stop thinking about the letter I had seen underneath, that M or N, part of a license plate that someone had gone to a lot of trouble to hide. I spent the next week asking questions. I talked to drivers at truck stops, talked to mechanics at garages, talked to dispatchers and dock workers and anyone else who might have seen a black truck with a knocking engine and an oil-covered plate. Most of them had not, but a few of them had stories. A driver in Baton Rouge told me he had seen a truck matching that description on I-10 near the Atchafalaya Basin. It had been running without lights, same as when I had seen it, and when he tried to pass it, it had sped up to match his speed. He had driven for 20 miles with that truck beside him before it finally dropped back and disappeared. A mechanic in New Iberia told me a black truck had been towed into his shop 6 months ago with a seized engine. He had told the driver it would take a week to fix, but when he came in the next morning, the truck was gone. No one had seen it leave. No one had paid the bill. It was just gone. And the only thing left behind was a puddle of black oil on the floor of his bay. A dispatcher in Morgan City told me she had gotten a call from one of her drivers in the middle of the night 3 years ago. He had been panicked, almost incoherent, talking about a black truck that was following him. A truck with a knocking engine that would not leave him alone. She had tried to calm him down, tried to get his location, but the call had cut off and she'd never heard from him again. His truck was found 2 days later on a back road outside of Houma. Empty, no sign of the driver, no sign of a struggle. Just an empty cab and a cargo that was never delivered. The more stories I heard, the more I realized that this truck had been out there for years, maybe decades, following drivers, appearing in different cities, always with that knocking engine, always with that oil-covered plate, and sometimes the drivers it followed disappeared. I thought about what Guidry had told me. The black truck takes them. I had not believed him then. I was starting to believe him now. I saw Royce Callender again on my next run through Shreveport. I stopped at his garage to get my oil changed and to ask him if the black truck was still parked across the street. He told me it was not. It had disappeared 3 days after I had seen it, same as the driver in New Iberia had described. One morning it was there, the next morning it was gone. No one had seen it leave. But Royce had something else to tell me. I did some asking around after you left, he said. About that truck, about the stories. He leaned against my rig, his arms folded across his chest. There is a woman up in Natchitoches who knows about it, he said. Runs a motel off Highway 1. Old place. Been there for 50 years or more. Drivers stay there sometimes. The ones who are passing through and need a place to sleep. He looked at me. Her name is Mina Ehrlich, and they say she knows things about that truck. Things nobody else knows. What kind of things? Royce shook his head. I do not know, but if you want answers, she is the one to talk to. He gave me directions to the motel and wished me luck. I thanked him and got back on the road. Natchitoches was about an hour north of Shreveport, a small city on the Cane River that had been around since before Louisiana was part of the United States. I had driven through it many times, but had never stopped. Never had a reason to. Now I did. The motel was on the outskirts of town, set back from the highway behind a row of cypress trees. It was an old place, like Royce had said, with a long, low building and a neon sign that flickered in the evening light. Pelican Motor Lodge, vacancy. I pulled into the parking lot and shut off my engine. There were a few cars parked in front of the rooms, but no other trucks. The place was quiet, peaceful. The kind of spot where you could get a good night's sleep without worrying about highway noise or lot lizards or any of the other problems that come with truck stop parking. I walked into the office. It was small and neat, with a counter and a rack of tourist brochures and a bell to ring for service. Behind the counter was a door that led to what I assumed were the manager's quarters. I rang the bell. A moment later, the door opened and a woman came out. She was in her 60s, maybe 70s, with silver hair pulled back in a bun and a face that was lined but still sharp. Her eyes were dark and watchful, the kind of eyes that took in everything and gave away nothing. "Help you?" she asked. "I am looking for Mina Ehrlich." "You found her." I introduced myself and told her why I was there. Told her about the black truck I had been seeing, about the knocking engine and the oil-covered plate, about the stories I had heard from other drivers, about the way the truck seemed to be following me from city to city, always showing up wherever I went. Mina listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those dark, watchful eyes. Then she said, "You touched the plate." It was not a question. "Yes," I said. I tried to wipe off some of the oil, to see the numbers. Mina shook her head slowly. "That was a mistake. Why?" "Because now it knows you," she said. "Before, it was just following you, watching you. But when you touched that plate, you made a connection. You let it know that you see it, that you are curious about it." She leaned forward. "And it does not like to be seen." I felt a chill run through me. "What is it? What is that truck?" Mina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Come with me." She led me out of the office and across the parking lot to a room at the far end of the building. She unlocked the door and gestured for me to go inside. The room was not a guest room. It was a storage space, filled with boxes and filing cabinets and stacks of old newspapers and magazines. But on one wall there was a corkboard covered with photographs and news clippings and handwritten notes. I walked over to the corkboard and looked at what was there. The photographs showed trucks, black trucks, dozens of them from different angles, in different locations, spanning what looked like decades based on the quality of the photos and the styles of the vehicles around them. Some were parked at rest stops. Some were on the highway. Some were in parking lots or on city streets or in places I did not recognize. But they were all the same truck. The same faded black paint, the same rusted chrome, the same worn tires, the same dark-tinted windows. Taken over the course of what had to be 30 or 40 years, in cities all across Louisiana and Texas and beyond. The news clippings were about disappearances, drivers who had gone missing, trucks found abandoned on the roadside, investigations that had gone nowhere, and cases that had never been solved. And the handwritten notes were names and dates and locations, a catalog of sightings and incidents going back decades. I turned to Mina. She was standing in the doorway, watching me with those dark eyes. "What is this?" I asked. "This is everything I have collected about that truck," she said. "Every sighting, every disappearance, every piece of information I could find." She walked over to the corkboard and pointed at one of the photographs. It showed the black truck parked in a lot somewhere, the license plate visible in the shot. Covered in oil. "I have been tracking it for 31 years, she said. "Ever since it took my brother." I stared at her. "Your brother?" She nodded. "He was a trucker, like you. He started seeing that truck in the spring of '93, following him, showing up wherever he went. He told me about it, and I thought he was losing his mind. Thought the stress of the job was getting to him. She looked at the photograph. Then one night he called me from a rest stop outside of Alexandria. He was scared, really scared. He said the truck was there, parked in the lot, and he could hear the engine knocking. He said he was going to go over and look at the plate. Try to get the numbers so he could report it to the police. She paused. That was the last time I talked to him. They found his rig the next morning, parked at the rest stop. Empty. No sign of him anywhere. No sign of a struggle. He just vanished. She looked at me, same as all the others. I did not know what to say. I looked at the corkboard, at the photographs and clippings and notes. 31 years of tracking. 31 years of trying to understand what had happened to her brother. And she still did not have an answer. What is it? I asked again. The truck. What is it? Mina shook her head. I do not know, she said. I have theories, guesses, but nothing I can prove. She pointed at one of the notes on the corkboard. A list of names and dates. What I do know is that it has been out there for a long time. Longer than 31 years. I have found reports going back to the 1970s, maybe earlier, and it is always the same. The black truck, the knocking engine, the plate covered in oil. She looked at me, and the drivers who see it, they do not stop seeing it. It keeps coming back, keeps following them, until one day they disappear. I thought about the stories I had heard, the driver in Beaumont, the driver outside Houma, all the others whose names were written on Mina's corkboard. I thought about my own name, about whether it would end up on that board someday. Is there any way to stop it? I asked. Any way to make it leave me alone? Mina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that I did not understand. Do not wipe the plate, she said. Whatever you do, do not try to see what is underneath. But I already wiped part of it. I know, she said. That is why it is not going to leave you alone now. She looked at me with those dark, watchful eyes. But if you wipe the rest of it, if you see the whole plate, that is when it takes you. I stayed at Mina's motel that night. I did not plan to. I had a load to deliver in Monroe by morning, and I was already behind schedule. But after what she had told me, after what I had seen on that corkboard, I could not make myself get back on the highway. Not in the dark, not alone. Mina gave me a room at the end of the building, away from the other guests. She told me to keep my door locked and my curtains closed and to call her if I heard anything unusual. I asked her what kind of unusual she meant. She just looked at me with those dark eyes and said, "You will know." I lay in bed for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the night. Cars passing on the highway, crickets in the grass, the soft hum of the air conditioning unit in the window. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard the knock. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up in bed. The sound was coming from outside, from the parking lot. I got up and went to the window, pulled the curtain back just enough to see out. The black truck was parked in the lot. It was sitting directly in front of my room, maybe 30 feet away, its engine running, that knocking sound filling the night air. The headlights were off. The cab was dark. I could not see anyone inside, but I knew it could see me. I let the curtain fall back and stepped away from the window. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone and called Mina's number. She answered on the first ring. "It is here," I said. "The truck. It is in the parking lot." "I know," she said. "I can hear it." A pause. "Stay in your room. Do not open the door. Do not go outside. It will leave before dawn." "How do you know?" "Because it always does." She hung up. I stood there in the dark room, listening to the knock. Tap, tap, tap. Steady and patient. like it had all the time in the world, like it knew I was not going anywhere. I went back to the window and looked out again. The truck was still there, still running, still knocking, and now I could see something else. There was something dripping from underneath the truck, a dark liquid pooling on the asphalt beneath the engine. At first, I thought it was oil, but it was spreading too fast, too far, covering too much ground. And it was not black like oil. It was darker than that, darker than anything I had ever seen. The liquid spread across the parking lot, flowing toward my room, toward my door, like it was reaching for me. I backed away from the window. The knock got louder, faster. Tap, 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 tap. And then, underneath the knock, I heard something else. A voice, faint and distant, like someone calling from very far away. I could not make out the words, could not even tell if it was a man or a woman. Just a voice, calling, calling, somewhere inside that sound. I put my hands over my ears and sat down on the bed, closed my eyes, tried to block out the knock and the voice and the image of that dark liquid spreading toward my door. I do not know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. Time did not seem to work right. The knock kept going, and the voice kept calling, and the night stretched on and on without end. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The knock stopped. The voice stopped. Everything went quiet. I opened my eyes and looked at the clock on the nightstand. 5:47 a.m. Almost dawn. I went to the window and looked out. The truck was gone. The parking lot was empty. The asphalt was dry. There was no sign of the dark liquid, no sign of the truck, no sign that anything had been there at all. I got dressed and went to find Mina. She was in the office making coffee. She looked like she had not slept either. "It comes here sometimes," she said when I walked in, "when there is someone staying who has seen it, who has touched it." She poured 2 cups and handed me one. It came for my brother the same way, the night before he disappeared. It parked outside his room and sat there all night, knocking. He called me at 3 a.m., terrified. I told him to stay inside. I told him it would leave at dawn. She looked down at her coffee. He did not listen. I sat down across from her. What happened? She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He went outside." He said he could not take it anymore, the sound, the waiting. He said he was going to go look at the plate, get the numbers, find out once and for all what that truck was. She raised her eyes to meet mine. I was on the phone with him when he did it. I heard him walking across the parking lot. I heard the knock getting louder. And then I heard him say something. Just one word. What word? Mina's face was pale. He said, "Oh." She set down her coffee cup. And then the line went dead. And I never heard from him again. I sat there processing what she had told me. Her brother had wiped the plate, had seen what was underneath. And whatever he had seen, it had taken him. I thought about the letter I had uncovered, the M or N, part of whatever was hidden beneath that oil. "What is on that plate?" I asked. "What did he see?" Mina shook her head. "I do not know. I have been trying to figure that out for 31 years. I have theories, but..." She trailed off. "Tell me." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I think it is a name." "A name? A plate number is a kind of name, is it not? It identifies a vehicle, tells you who it belongs to, where it comes from. If you know the plate, you know the truck." She looked at me. "I think that truck does not want to be known. I think it covers the plate because if anyone sees the whole thing, if anyone identifies it, then it becomes real, becomes fixed, becomes something that can be found and stopped." She paused, and I think it takes the people who try to see it, takes them so they cannot tell anyone what they learned. I thought about that. About a truck that did not want to be identified. About a plate that was covered in oil to keep it hidden. About drivers who disappeared when they tried to see what was underneath. It made a terrible kind of sense, but it did not explain what the truck was, where it came from, why it was out there, following drivers, taking them. I asked Mina those questions. She shook her head. "I do not know," she said. "I have spent 31 years looking for answers, and I still do not know." She looked at me. "But I know one thing. You cannot run from it. Once it has marked you, once you have touched it, it will keep coming back. It will follow you wherever you go. It will park outside your window and knock all night and wait for you to make a mistake." She leaned forward. "The only way to stop it is to give it what it wants." "What does it want?" Mina's eyes were dark and sad. "It wants to stay hidden. It wants to make sure no one ever sees that plate." She paused. "And it will take anyone who tries." I left Natchitoches that morning and drove to Monroe to deliver my load. I was late, and the customer was not happy, but I did not care. I could not stop thinking about what Mina had told me, about her brother, about the plate, about the thing that was following me and would not stop until I gave it what it wanted. I thought about running, quitting trucking, moving somewhere far away and never getting behind the wheel of a rig again. Maybe then the black truck would lose interest. Maybe then it would find someone else to follow. But I knew it would not work. Mina had said it herself. Once it has marked you, it will keep coming back. I was marked now. I had touched the plate. I had made a connection. There was no running from that. So I kept driving. Kept hauling loads from city to city, terminal to terminal, customer to customer. I did my job and collected my pay and tried to pretend that everything was normal. But nothing was normal. The truck was everywhere now. I saw it in Monroe, parked behind a warehouse. I saw it in Alexandria, sitting in the lot of an abandoned gas station. I saw it in Lake Charles and Beaumont and Houston and every other city on my route. Sometimes it was close. Sometimes it was far away. But it was always there, always watching, always knocking. Tap, tap, tap. The sound followed me everywhere. I heard it in truck stops and rest areas and fuel stations. I heard it in motel parking lots and loading docks and customer warehouses. I heard it when I was driving and when I was sleeping and when I was sitting in a diner trying to eat a meal. Tap, tap, tap. It was driving me crazy. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating, stopped talking to other drivers. I just drove and listened to the knock and waited for the black truck to appear in my mirrors. 3 weeks after I left Natchitoches, I called Mina. "I cannot take it anymore," I told her. "The sound, the waiting. I have to do something." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What are you thinking of doing?" "I am thinking of looking at the plate." Silence. "Kaysen, I know what you told me. I know what happened to your brother. But I cannot live like this. I cannot spend the rest of my life being followed by that thing, listening to that sound, waiting to disappear." I took a breath. At least if I look at the plate, it will be over, one way or another. Mina did not say anything for a long time. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. Could hear the weight of 31 years in that breath. Then she said, "If you are going to do it here." "What?" "Come back to Natchitoches, come back to the motel. If you are going to look at that plate, I want to be there. I want to see what happens." She paused. "And if you disappear, I want to know where you went." I told her I would be there in 2 days. I had a load to deliver in Shreveport first, and then I would come. She told me to be careful. She told me not to do anything until I got there. I told her I would not. But that night, parked at a truck stop outside of Shreveport, I heard the knock again, louder than before. Closer than before. Tap, tap, tap. I looked in my mirror and saw the black truck parked 2 spaces behind me. Engine running, lights off. That dark liquid dripping from underneath, spreading across the asphalt. And I knew I was not going to make it to Nachitoshi's. The truck was not going to wait that long. I got out of my cab. I do not know why. I had promised Mina I would wait. I had told myself I would be smart, be careful, not take any chances. But the knock was so loud, so close, and I was so tired of hearing it. I walked toward the black truck. The knock got louder with each step, faster. Tap, 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 like a heartbeat speeding up, like something getting excited. I reached the back of the truck and looked at the plate. It was covered in that black substance, same as before. Thick and slick and warm. I could feel the heat coming off it, even from a foot away. I raised my hand. I thought about Mina's brother, about the word he had said before he disappeared. Oh, like he had seen something, like he had understood something. I thought about all the drivers whose names were on Mina's corkboard, all the ones who had disappeared over the years, taken by this truck, this thing, this hungry presence that did not want to be known. I thought about my own name, about whether it would end up on that board. And then I thought about something else. I thought about what Mina had said, that the truck wanted to stay hidden, that it took the drivers who tried to see the plate because it did not want to be identified. But what if that was not the whole truth? What if the truck did not take the drivers to keep them quiet? What if it took them because they had seen what they were looking for? What if the plate was not a license number at all? What if it was something else? I stood there with my hand raised, inches from the plate, the knock filling my head, the heat filling my skin. And I made a decision. I lowered my hand. I turned around. I walked back to my truck. I got in the cab, started the engine, and drove away. The knock followed me out of the parking lot, followed me onto the highway, followed me all the way to Shreveport and beyond. But I did not look back, and I did not stop. I made it to Nachitoshi's the next afternoon. Mina was waiting for me in the office. She looked at my face and knew something had happened. "You almost did it," she said. "Did you not?" I nodded. "Last night, at a truck stop. I was standing right there with my hand on the plate. But you did not wipe it." "No. Why not?" I sat down across from her. "Because I realized something. You said the truck takes drivers to keep them from seeing the plate, to keep itself hidden." "Yes. But what if that is not why it takes them? What if it takes them because they give it what it wants?" Mina frowned. "I do not understand." I leaned forward. "What if the plate is not hiding the truck's identity? What if it is hiding something else, something the truck wants people to find?" Mina was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Like a trap, like a trap." She sat back in her chair, her face pale. 31 years, she said. 31 years, and I never thought of that." She looked at me. "My brother did not disappear because he saw something he should not have seen. He disappeared because he saw exactly what the truck wanted him to see." I nodded, and now we have to figure out what that is. We spent the next 2 days going through Mina's files. Every photograph, every news clipping, every handwritten note. 31 years of research spread out across the floor of her storage room, sorted into piles by date and location and type of incident. We were looking for a pattern, something that would tell us what the plate was hiding, something that would explain why the truck took the drivers who saw it. On the second night, we found it. It was in one of the oldest photographs from 1978. A black truck parked at a rest stop somewhere in East Texas. The image was grainy and faded, but you could see the plate clearly. It was not covered in oil, not hidden. Just a normal license plate clearly visible in the shot. Mina had never noticed it before. In 31 years of collecting these photographs, she had never thought to look at the plates. She had assumed they were all covered, all hidden, because that was how she had always seen the truck. But this one was not. I leaned close to the photograph, squinting at the faded numbers and letters. The plate was from Louisiana, and the number was... I stopped. I looked at Mina. She was staring at the photograph, her face white. "That is my brother's plate," she said. "What? That number? That is the license plate for my brother's truck, the one he was driving when he disappeared." I looked at the photograph again, at the plate, at the black truck that was carrying it. "That is impossible," I said. "This photo is from 1978. Your brother disappeared in 1993. "I know. So how can that truck have his plate 15 years before he disappeared?" Mina did not answer. She just stared at the photograph, her hands trembling. I looked at the other photographs, the newer ones, where the plate was covered in oil. I thought about what Mina had said, that the truck took the drivers who saw the plate because it did not want to be identified. But that was not true. The truck did not have its own plate. It had someone else's plate, a stolen plate, a plate that belonged to a driver who would disappear 15 years later. And if that was true for Mina's brother, then maybe it was true for all of them. Maybe the plate changed. Maybe every time the truck took a driver, it took their plate too, put it on the back of that black rig, carried it around until the next driver saw it, the next driver touched it, the next driver wiped away the oil and saw the name underneath. Their own name. I told Mina my theory. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, staring at the photograph of her brother's plate on the back of the black truck. Then she said, "If you are right, then the plate is not hiding the truck's identity. It is showing the next victim's identity." "Yes. And when a driver wipes away the oil and sees the plate, they see their own name, their own number, and then the truck takes them." Mina closed her eyes. "My brother saw his own plate on that truck," she said. "That is why he said, 'Oh.' He recognized it. He understood what was going to happen. And then it happened." She opened her eyes. They were wet. "If you had wiped the plate," she said, "what do you think you would have seen?" I did not answer. I did not have to. We both knew what I would have seen. That night, I made a decision. I was not going to run from the black truck anymore. I was not going to hide from it or avoid it or pretend it was not there. I was going to confront it. I was going to look at that plate and see what was underneath. Not because I wanted to disappear, but because I needed to know. I needed to know if my name was on that plate. I needed to know if I was the next one. And if I was, I needed to know why. What had I done to be chosen? What made me different from all the other drivers on the highway? Maybe there was no reason. Maybe it was random. Maybe the truck just picked people and took them, and there was nothing more to it than that. But I did not think so. I thought there was something else going on. Something we had not figured out yet. Something that connected all those drivers, all those disappearances, all those names on Mina's corkboard. And I thought the only way to find out was to see the plate. I told Mina what I was planning. She tried to talk me out of it, told me I was crazy, told me I would end up like her brother, like all the others, vanished without a trace. I told her I knew. I told her I was going to do it anyway. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, "If you are going to do it, I am going to be there. I am going to watch. And if you disappear, I am going to write down everything that happens." She paused. Maybe then I will finally understand. We waited for the truck to come. It did not take long. Around midnight, I heard the knock. That familiar sound drifting across the parking lot, filling the night air. Tap, tap, tap. Steady and patient. I went to the window and looked out. The black truck was there. parked in the same spot it had parked before, directly in front of my room. Engine running, lights off, that dark liquid dripping from underneath, spreading across the asphalt. I looked at Mina. She was standing beside me, her face pale but determined. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No." But I opened the door and walked outside anyway. The night was warm and humid, thick with the smell of the bayou. The knock was louder out here, filling my head, drowning out everything else. I could feel it in my chest, in my teeth, in my bones. A vibration that was almost physical. I walked toward the truck. Mina followed behind me, keeping her distance, watching. I reached the back of the truck and stood there, looking at the plate, at the black oil covering it, hiding whatever was underneath, at the truth that I was about to uncover. I raised my hand. I thought about Mina's brother, about the word he had said. Oh, I thought about all the drivers who had stood where I was standing, all the ones who had raised their hands and wiped the plate and seen what was underneath. I thought about what I was going to see, my name, my number, my truck, the next victim. I put my hand on the plate. The oil was warm, hot almost. It clung to my fingers like something alive, something that did not want to let go. I could feel it pulsing under my touch, throbbing in rhythm with the knock. Tap, tap, tap. I started to wipe. The oil came away slowly, reluctantly, revealing the metal underneath. I saw letters first, then numbers. A Louisiana plate, just like in the photograph from 1978. I wiped more, faster. I needed to see. I needed to know. And then I saw it, the plate, the name, not mine. I stood there, staring at the plate, my hand frozen in place. It was not my name, not my number, not my truck. It was Mina's. I turned and looked at her. She was standing about 20 feet away watching me. Her face was pale. Her eyes were wide. She knew. She had always known. "Mina," I said. She shook her head slowly. "No, that is not possible. I have never driven truck. I have never had a commercial license. That cannot be my plate." But it was. The number was clear. The state was clear. Louisiana. And the name on the registration, which should not have been visible on a plate, but was somehow written in letters that seemed to glow in the darkness. Mina Ehrlich. I backed away from the truck. The knock was louder now, faster, that excited rhythm I had heard before. Tap, 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 tap. The engine revved. The truck started to move. Not forward, not backward, just move, shifting in place like an animal adjusting its weight, getting ready. "Mina, run," I said. But she did not run. She just stood there staring at the truck, at the plate with her name on it. 31 years, she said. Her voice was quiet, almost calm. 31 years I have been tracking this truck, collecting photographs, writing down names, trying to understand what happened to my brother. She looked at me. I thought I was the one hunting it, but it was hunting me, all along, waiting for me to get close enough. The truck revved again. The knock was deafening now. "Mina." She shook her head. "It was never going to take you, Kaysen. You were just the bait, the thing that would bring me here, bring me close enough to see." She looked back at the truck. My brother did not see his own name on that plate. He saw mine. He was trying to warn me, and I never understood. The truck started rolling forward, slowly, deliberately, moving toward Mina. She did not run, she just stood there, watching it come. "Mina," I shouted, "move, get out of the way." She looked at me one last time. Her eyes were sad but peaceful, the eyes of someone who had finally found the answer they had been looking for. even if it was not the answer they wanted. "Take care of the files," she said. "Keep tracking it. Maybe you will figure out what I could not." The truck reached her, and she was gone. I do not know how to describe what I saw. One moment Mina was standing there, and the next moment she was not. There was no impact, no collision, no sound of a body being struck. She simply ceased to exist, erased from the world like a word wiped from a page. The truck rolled past the place where she had been standing and kept going. Across the parking lot, toward the highway, its engine still running, its knock still sounding, tap, 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 but slower now, satisfied. I stood there in the empty parking lot staring at the space where Mina had been, at the asphalt that showed no sign of her, at the night that had swallowed her whole. Then I looked at the truck. It was pulling onto the highway, heading north, its taillights glowing red in the darkness, and on the back, where the plate had shown Mina's name, there was nothing but oil, black and thick and hiding whatever was underneath, waiting for the next driver to find it, waiting for the next name. That was 3 months ago. I took Mina's files, all of them. The photographs and clippings and notes. 31 years of research packed into boxes and loaded into my truck. I brought them home and set them up in my spare room, the same way she had set them up in her storage space. And I started tracking. I drive the same routes I have always driven. Lake Charles to Houston, Shreveport to Baton Rouge, Lafayette to Monroe. I haul the same loads, stop at the same fuel stations, park at the same truck stops. But now I am looking. Every city I visit, I ask about the black truck. Every driver I meet, I tell them what to watch for. The faded paint, the rusted chrome, the worn tires, the knock. Tap, tap, tap. Some of them laugh at me. Some of them think I am crazy. But some of them listen. Some of them have seen it themselves. And some of them have stories, names and dates and places that I add to Mina's collection. The corkboard is getting full. I have not seen the truck since that night in Natchitoches, have not heard the knock, have not felt that prickling on my skin that tells me it is close. But I know it is out there. I know it is still hunting. And I know that someday it will find someone else. Another driver who hears the knock and thinks something is wrong with their engine. Another driver who sees the black truck in their mirror and wonders why it is following them. Another driver who stops at a rest area or a fuel station or a truck stop and finds it waiting there, engine running, plate covered in oil, waiting to show them their name. I do not know what the truck is, do not know where it came from, or why it takes people or what happens to them after they disappear. Mina spent 31 years looking for those answers and never found them. But I know one thing. The plate is not hiding the truck's identity. It is showing you your own. And if you see your name on that plate, if you wipe away the oil and find yourself looking back, then you are already gone. Sometimes, late at night when I am driving alone on a dark highway, I think I hear it. A knock, faint and distant, barely there. Tap, tap, tap. I check my mirrors. I check my engine. I check the trucks around me and the shadows by the roadside. I never see anything, but I know it is out there, waiting, hunting, looking for the next name to put on that plate. I just hope it is not mine.